On the threshold of a luxurious mansion sat an unhappy child, deprived of love and affection for reasons unknown to him. Transparent tears slid down the boy's cheeks, symbolizing his mental pain and loneliness. Perhaps if someone, at least one person, had given him love, the end would have been different. This day radically changed the fate of the main character. A middle-aged man held a little girl in his arms and asked Lucian why he went out. Hearing the name Lucian, the girl immediately felt that she had already heard it somewhere before. The boy replied that, having learned about the arrival of his younger sister, he went out to meet her. And not only the name, the guy's face also looked familiar. The girl remembered that she saw him in the BL webtoon that she read before her rebirth. Before the resettlement, she lived like garbage, locked within the four walls of her room. On top of everything else, there was something that only made her more depressed. The finale of the webtoon. There is another doll living in the dollhouse, which she has been following for 3 years, just left her in shock. The heroine felt incredible disappointment and rage when she reached the end, full of sadness and joylessness. She fell asleep while writing a malicious comment to the author, and, opening her eyes, the girl saw a completely new world in front of her. At first, she was confused, not understanding where she was and what was happening. But being an experienced reader, she immediately assumed that this was the very resettlement she had only heard about. The heroine was fond of reading web novels, and, quickly realizing what was what, thought about what kind of story she found herself in. A novel or a manhwa? The girl's parents suddenly entered the room, a woman with golden hair and azure eyes, and a man with green hair and light red eyes. They joyfully approached the girl and, patting her on the head, praised her for her outfit and appearance, saying how beautiful she was. The love of caring parents for the body into which the heroine moved, step by step, healed her soul, which was once empty and gloomy. Over time, the girl became completely accustomed to the life of the only daughter of the Orlando Count family, Rachel de Orlando. The Count couple had to leave for a while, so they said goodbye to the girl and asked her to wait for them. Even if their love was not intended for the real heroine, it was enough for her. She just wanted to continue to live such a happy life, but that day was the last. That day, her parents had a carriage accident and left this world. While Rachel was drowning in her sadness, her uncle took over the title and the entire family line. Then an imperial duke came to her, who expressed his deepest condolences for the tragedy that happened to the Orlando couple and said that he was her godfather. Despite all her uncle's protests, the duke turned to the girl and told her that he was a close friend of her father and wanted to adopt her, promising that from now on she could live in peace since he would protect her. At that moment, she felt that she was safer with this man than with her greedy uncle. Taking the girl, the duke got into the carriage and they headed to his mansion. There was silence in the carriage all the way. They rode in silence. Looking at her new guardian, Rachel tried to remember where she had heard the name Duke Leon. The heroine, getting out of the carriage, saw in front of her a beautiful mansion that rose majestically in front of her. Rachel was amazed by his beauty and grandeur. Suddenly, the Duke, smiling, picked up the baby in his arms. He looked at her with a look full of longing and said that everything that belonged to the ducal family was now hers. The Duke gently hugged the baby to himself and said that she was Liam's daughter, and therefore she was like his own daughter to him too. Their conversation was interrupted by the Duke's son, who called his father. Then the Duke looked sternly at his son and asked why he went out. The Duke was pleased with the answer of his son Lucian, who said that he had gone out to meet his younger sister. He introduced Rachel de Orlando to his son Lucian and said that they would now live together as one family. The young man seemed familiar to her. His long eyelashes, gold-colored eyes, scarlet lips, indifference on his face, and even a small mole right under his eye. This was the main character of the BL webtoon that the girl read before her rebirth. Lucian was her favorite hero, the repentant madman, Lucian de Leon. The heroine was stunned when, looking at her, the Duke added that she would soon become Rachel de Leon. It was at this moment that the girl realized who exactly she had possessed. In the novel, Rachel, whose body she took over, was Lucian's younger sister. Duke Leon spoiled her too much as a child, and, turning into an arrogant scoundrel, she bullied Lucian in every possible way. Therefore, in the end, she turned out to be cannon fodder, the very first to fall at the hands of Lucian. The heroine was horrified. Realizing what role she was playing in this story, the Duke and Lucian looked at the girl with confusion. The heroine only thought that she did not want to die. Moreover, she did not want to die at the hands of her pet. First of all, the Duke took the girl to her room, which was quite large and colorful, and as soon as she was alone, she plopped down on the large and comfortable sofa. She needed to analyze and sort out her thoughts. In the BL webtoon, Lucian's early years were extremely unhappy. He was a boy with a sad past because his father didn't love him. Lucian's father, and the man who brought Rachel to the estate, Duke Pedro de Leon, also suffered abuse from his father, the previous duke. The reason for this was his love not for women, but for men. And the one he loved was Rachel's father, Liam de Orlando, and the two carefully nurtured their love under the guise of friendship. Until one day, the previous duke found out about this, and from then on, beatings and psychological violence began, allegedly for educational purposes. He could not accept the fact that his son preferred men and caused them to break up. By that time, the Duke had completely brought his son to his knees, and he ended up marrying the woman his father chose. Renouncing his feelings, Petro was determined to leave remorse and love for Liam behind and become a good husband to his wife and a wonderful father to his unborn child. However, he was never able to love his son, who was like two peas in a pod like his hated father. As soon as the heroine remembered how it all began, she took a deep breath, because male love figured even in the history of fathers. But the most important thing for her now is Lucian's condition and the fear of her own death. After thinking about this, Rachel realized that not everything is so bad yet, and life under the same roof with her favorite can make an ardent fan happy. While she was lost in her thoughts, suddenly someone knocked on the door. From a sudden knock on the door, she stood up on the bed and, in confusion, answered to come in. And then Lucian, having received permission, entered the room. At that moment, in the eyes of a devoted fan, her favorite character shone brighter than all the stars. And when such a bright and impressive figure appeared from behind the door, I closed my eyes. Entering the room, he announced his desire to talk. To his surprise, the girl smiled and invited him to come in and sit down to talk. Surprised by such a warm welcome, Lucian narrowed his eyes and sat down opposite Rachel with an expressionless face. His presence alone aroused delight in the girl, and she could not take her eyes off her pet. Then a maid entered the room and announced that from now on, she would be Lady Rachel's personal maid. Noticing the young shopkeeper in Rachel's room, the maid was stunned with surprise. The heroine was delighted, deciding that the maid had come very opportunely, and asked to bring tea. However, the maid continued to look at the guy in bewilderment. Rachel didn't like the look of the maid. She was unpleasant that she was looking at Lucian like that, and the guy hastened to say that he had only come in for a short time. The girl looked sternly at the maid and said that her brother had come to her, and she did not understand what the problem was. The maid's expression quickly changed as Rachel's stern words reached her ears, and she politely replied that she would bring it now. After the maid left, the girl offered Lucian her tea with a smile, adding that she had not yet tried it herself. But the guy slowly shook his head, refused, and said that he couldn't do it. Rachel asked in surprise why he said that. Hearing his answer that now was not the time for a meal, the heroine opened her mouth wide in shock because she thought that this was just nonsense, because the guy was not in the army. At that moment, the girl realized her destiny. She moved to save her pet. In her eyes, Lucian looked painfully thin and deeply sad. Looking at him now, the girl didn't understand how the crazy main character from the novel could be so thin. The heroine mentally declared war on the author, expressing to him everything that she did not have the strength to write when she read this webtoon. She was determined to change the genre of this story because she did not want to watch her beloved character die. Remembering her sad past, full regrets, she wanted him to grow up to be a good person, capable of experiencing both joy and sorrow, and not an insensitive doll. Also, despite everything, she longed to change her fate and avoid death in order to live her life in peace. Looking at Lucian's thin arms, Rachel asked if he really had a certain time for eating, and he replied that this was true and he lived according to a set schedule. According to the original, the hero woke up at dawn, training all alone on the training field. He ate food that was clearly not suitable for his growing body. And the last point of this terrible routine was that the hero went to the Duke for punishment. The Duke used the ridiculous excuse more than once, saying that this was just a method of raising his child, and Lucian blindly believed him. No one in this estate told him that this was abnormal, so the hero accepted everything as it was. Rachel decided to start implementing her plan to save her pet by talking about the strategy of Plan A and Plan B, and suggested that he create 2 routines at once for peace of mind. She explained to Lucian that the first was the main one, and the second was needed in case the first did not go according to plan. The hero blinked in confusion when he heard her words, since this was the first time he had heard about it. Hearing his slightly subdued voice, Rachel quickly added that he knew this now, and if he made 2 routines to be prepared for unexpected situations, life might become a little easier. Lucian answered a little thoughtfully that he needed his father's permission. The heroine looked at her lover with pity and asked him to be sure to get permission. She had read the original and already knew what to expect, but she didn't think that his life was so similar to a doll's. Lucian was stunned when he heard Rachel say that he was now her brother and they were one family. Defiantly wiping away her tears, the heroine said that her family always got together for tea. After listening to the girl, the hero nodded slightly and promised to ask his father's permission. Rachel thanked her brother with a bright smile. She said she would look forward to it. After tea, the girl asked Lucian, saying that she had a lot of fun. She said this from the bottom of her heart, to which the hero, leaving the room, smiled slightly for the first time. But as soon as the door of the room closed, his expression changed, and the smile disappeared from his lips. Initially, he assumed that Rachel would be just a small child who did not understand anything. However, during the tea party, he noticed that she was smart and was immediately able to determine her position. After meeting her, Lucian also realized that her situation was different from his, who had failed to even gain recognition from the head of the family. He thought that perhaps she had deliberately given him the impossible task of drinking tea. After Lucian left, the maid formally introduced herself again, saying that her name was Amber and that she was her personal maid. Rachel greeted her with a polite smile. After the official part, the maid said that she would help her change into a new dress and take her to the dining room. Rachel changed and followed Amber into the dining room. As Rachel walked down the hallway, she thought about her next steps. Firstly, the heroine had to avoid the pitiful end prepared for her by the original. Secondly, she wanted to save her pet Lucian from terror. And to achieve her goals, first of all, she had to change the Duke's feelings. While she was thinking about the Duke, she also thought about Lucian's mother and wondered if she would be present at the dinner. Duchess Camilla de Leon is Duke Pedro's partner in a political marriage. As far as the heroine knew, the Duchess suffered from depression. Therefore, she either did not know, or simply pretended not to know, about the kind of treatment Lucian had to endure. As Rachel thought about it, she realized that there wasn't a single person in this house who didn't show signs of mental illness or trauma. Amber looked at the girl as she sighed softly and announced that they had already arrived. The maid, opening the door for Rachel, informed the Duke that my lady had arrived. The heroine quickly went inside, walking from the dark corridor into the bright dining room, and saw the Duke, who was sitting alone at the end of the huge table. Rachel was stunned as she looked in Duke's direction after her eyes finally adjusted to the bright light of the dining room. She was shocked by the abundance of dishes on the table. Seeing the girl, the Duke smiled tenderly and invited her to the table. Looking around, Rachel noticed that neither the Duchess nor Lucian were at the table. She assumed that they were simply delayed, and rather quickly walked over to the seat next to the Duke, and, with Amber's help, sat down in her chair. Taking her place at the table, the girl greeted the Duke, who was in high spirits, with a smile. Since there were too many dishes on the table, the heroine casually asked if anyone else would come, to which the Duke replied with a smile that he wanted to spend time alone with his daughter. Hearing with what tenderness the man called her daughter, the heroine understood why the real Rachel behaved so arrogantly with the others. Rachel thanked him without any extravagance. She appreciated the kindness with which he treated her and how attached he was to her. However, this was a little burdensome for the girl, since she believed that this care should be reserved for Lucian. She felt somehow out of place, because from her point of view, she was taking away all the love that belonged to Lucian. Although Rachel smiled, she felt completely uneasy in such an atmosphere. Rachel looked at the Duke and asked permission to ask a question. After receiving permission, she asked if he really intended to adopt her. The Duke was slightly surprised to hear her question, and with all seriousness answered positively, saying that it was the duty of a godfather to become her guardian. As the heroine thought everything was happening, as in the original story, she quickly nodded, letting her know that she understood everything. Rachel was lost in her own thoughts for a moment. Then the Duke asked in a friendly voice, which was in stark contrast to his attitude a few minutes ago, if she had any more questions. Taking the opportunity, Rachel decided to ask about what interested her most, whether he was eating with his older brother. She looked at the Duke, her huge shining eyes expressing the hope that after her question, he would invite Lucien to the table. However, he only replied that Lucien had his own meal schedule. Hearing these words, the girl's face changed dramatically. She saw no point in a strict schedule that made the child's life more difficult. Trying to be as nice as possible, Rachel looked at the Duke and said that she would like to sit at the same table with everyone. The Duke was slightly surprised and winced a little. Seeing his reluctance, she suggested that perhaps the Duke considered her request too impudent. Rachel was already upset, when suddenly the Duke smiled kindly at her again and promised to fulfill any wish of his daughter, after which he coldly ordered the servant to bring that child. The happy thought that she could share dinner with her favorite overshadowed her mind, and the heroine joyfully thanked the Duke. The cold expression on the man's face was replaced by a gentle one, like the misty morning sun. Looking at the girl, the Duke gently stroked a strand of her hair and, as if remembering someone very dear, said that she also constantly thanks. The heroine was always insightful and therefore very sensitive to changes in a person's mood and always tried to understand what he was feeling. She understood the reason he loved her. It was all because of her father. Looking at her, he saw Liam. If the heroine did not know this, then, most likely, she would be like the original Rachel. And, although the heroine understood everything, for some reason she was offended in her soul. The servant quickly brought Lucien. The boy, whose face showed confusion, noticed Rachel and froze for a moment. The heroine, seeing her favorite, was lost in thoughts about how irresistible he was. Entering the dining room, Lucien took a seat opposite Rachel. The heroine greedily devoured the food, sneaking glances at her pet and trying to feed him so that he would gain weight. The Duke did not hide his smile, addressed to the girl throughout the entire meal. He was always cold, and therefore it was strange for Lucien to see this side of him. After dinner, Rachel said a warm goodbye to her brother and the Duke and left the dining room with Amber. Lucien, usually reserved in his displays of emotion, stood behind his father, looking tense, while the Duke waved at her with a soft smile. At that moment, it never occurred to the heroine that her hasty decision could upset the Duke even more. After Rachel returned to her room, the Duke's expression suddenly changed. His mouth tightened, his gentle smile disappeared, and his soft eyes turned into a stern gaze, and he walked out of the dining room first, telling Lucien to come to his office. Then the girl was very happy and could not even imagine that her hasty mercy would only make Lucien suffer more. She could not even imagine such an outcome even in her worst nightmare. Just recently, Lucien had dinner with his father, and it made him feel as if his father had finally acknowledged him. However, in the office where he was being taught discipline, the Duke, in his usual stern tone, asked about his meeting with Rachel without permission. The Duke was angry and reprimanded Lucien for meeting Rachel without his knowledge. The boy stood in the office with an indifferent face, as usual, but today he did not want to be here. He remembered the little girl's smile when she called him brother, and thanked him for drinking tea together. Since Rachel called him brother, he also told his father that he visited her because she was now his little sister. But the Duke accused him of somehow convincing an innocent child to ask him to come to dinner. The Duke became furious and scolded Lucien and told him not to do anything stupid again. Under the pretext of the need to correct his bad head, the Duke punished him again. Coming out of his father's office, Lucien found it difficult to breathe. He walked with difficulty to his room, leaning on the wall. At that moment, his only desire was to quickly return to his room, where there was no one. The Duke's attitude towards his adopted daughter was strikingly different from his attitude towards his own son, and the next day he presented Rachel with many luxurious dresses. Rachel was amazed by such luxury and, together with Amber, was choosing with interest which dress to wear. To the great surprise of the maid, she chose the most modest and decent dress, after which she, accompanied by a maid, went to meet Camilla. Camilla is a duchess, and directly the mother of Lucien. However, she was not allowed into the room, and the duchess's maid reported that the duchess was not well, so she could not receive her. The heroine was dumbfounded that she was rejected. But on the other hand, she understood that this was to be expected, because no one would want to see the stepdaughter who was arbitrarily brought by her husband, especially if it was the child of his lover. From the moment of her marriage, it was obvious that the Duchess would fall into depression, because she was forced into a husband in a political marriage who will never love her and hates his own son. Moreover, he only cared about the daughter of his past love. In the original, the Duchess's feelings reached a peak, and she eventually fell into a deep depression. She realized that the very first button of this marriage was already fastened incorrectly, and she blamed the Duke for this, after which she fainted and died. The heroine asked the maid to tell the Duchess that she wished her a speedy recovery. She sincerely wanted Camilla to overcome her mental illness and start taking care of her son before it was too late. After this, the heroine became convinced that now there was no one to take care of Lucian except her. Since the meeting with the Duchess did not take place, Amber asked Milady if she would return to the room, but the girl answered in the negative. Rachel asked Amber where her brother Lucian was now. The boy, according to his schedule, studied in his room. Having learned this, holding a basket of snacks in her hands, she headed towards her pet. Lucian was startled to see Rachel at the door of his room. She said with a smile that she had brought delicious fruits to eat together. However, the guy refused, saying that now, according to his schedule, he must rewrite the history books. Rachel was sad again when she heard about the schedule, because she hoped to feed him at least sometimes. She asked about the 2 schedules they had talked about earlier, but Lucian said that his father had decided to leave the main schedule unchanged. The boy explained that this is the only way he can become an ideal successor, capable of managing the family. Hearing her say that in this case she would not be able to interfere with his routine, Lucian thought that now Rachel would give up, because children often give up easily when things don't go according to their plan. However, unexpectedly, the girl brought the grape to Lucian's mouth to feed him. When Lucian looked at her dumbfounded, she said with a bright smile that in that case she herself would put a grape in his mouth. He did not expect this and did not know what to answer. Meanwhile, the girl explained that he could continue to cheat, and he only needed to open his mouth when she spoke, after which she again brought the berry to his lips, tried to feed him, but he did not open his mouth, and I tapped it on Lucian's lips. Noticing that the boy froze in place, with shining eyes, she began to sing a children's song so that he would open his mouth. After the girl repeatedly tried to feed him, Lucian finally opened his mouth. Rachel quickly shoved the grape into his mouth, while he opened his mouth slightly, and was extremely happy that she was able to achieve her goal. She animatedly asked if it was tasty and if he liked the berry. When she received no response, she became upset, thinking that perhaps she had been too persistent. Confused, the heroine stared at him, batting her eyelashes stupidly. She looked at her favorite character and tried to understand what his blank look meant. Rachel saw momentary confusion on his expressionless doll face. She looked at him intently, hoping that he still liked it. Trying to be as polite as possible, she told Lucian that he could ignore her and continue studying. At that moment, he noticed that he had made a mistake by being distracted by Rachel. While Lucian was replacing the damaged leaf with a new one, the heroine invited him to try raspberries. Without waiting for an answer, she again extended her hand to him to put the raspberry in his mouth. He looked emotionlessly at Rachel's small fingers, with which she held the berry. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Opening the door a crack, Amber told Rachel that the Duke was calling her, and she had come to escort her. Rachel was surprised and disappointed, but she could not ignore the Duke's words. Before leaving, she left a basket of fruit for Lucian, asking him to be sure to eat it. She also wished him strength in rewriting. For some time, Lucian stared motionless at the door through which Rachel had left. He then turned his gaze to the fruit basket. Lucian took one raspberry from the basket and decided to try it. However, as he expected, the raspberries turned out to be completely tasteless. But at the same time, the raspberries Rachel gave him were delicious. And it was very strange, because he had a secret that no one knew about. Under the influence of the black substance, he lost the ability to sense taste. The creature suggested that this was possible due to the special magical waves emanating from the girl, but Lucian did not want to listen and ordered the creature to be silent. A month later, the Leon family officially adopted the heroine, and she became Rachel de Leona. However, the Duchess still avoided meeting her and conveyed through the maid that it was difficult for her to see her. The heroine understood why Camilla refused to accept her, But if she did not come to greet her, it would offend her even more. Rachel had only one request for the Duchess, that she take care of her son. As for the Duke, nothing has changed. He was still affectionate and friendly with her. However, as soon as she started talking about Lucian, discontent appeared on his face, which was difficult to hide. She mentally prayed that the Duke would start thinking about his own son. Lucian also did not change. He also trained hard, and under this scorching sun, he shone so brightly, like an angel descended from heaven. He still followed his damn routine. Therefore, the heroine decided to look for a loophole in him, and noticing Lucian, she happily ran up and offered to take a short break and have a snack. But when she wanted to get closer to him, he took a step back. The heroine was so surprised by his reaction that she froze in place. Lucian was embarrassed. He did not understand why he did this. He turned away from her and said that it was dangerous, so she should not come near him while he was training. The heroine called him cheerfully again, and he, hearing her voice, turned to her. Pointing to a bench nearby, she suggested that he sit down so that he could rest a little and drink the refreshing iced tea that she had brought. Lucian agreed, and putting his sword aside, walked over to the bench and sat down next to Rachel. His sweaty black hair, plastered to his forehead, glistened like obsidian. He combed it carelessly back, and in Rachel's eyes, he was, as always, irresistible. Rachel gave him some iced tea to drink and refresh himself. Suddenly, he called her by name, which made her incredibly happy. However, his next words, that her frequent visits put him in a difficult position, shocked her. He explained that he had to move according to a routine. Seeing Lucian sigh softly, she thought that perhaps he was disappointed. This was the first time she had seen him like this. For the entire month, she deliberately wandered around the castle, looking for him, and when she met him, she greeted him energetically and joyfully, and deliberately tried to drag out the conversation for as long as possible. Therefore, it was quite expected that she managed to get pretty tired of him. Seeing that the heroine became quiet and sad, he clarified that it was because she was not on his schedule. Thinking that he was pointing out her indiscretion, she asked for forgiveness and promised not to act like that in the future. But Lucian explained to her that he meant that the problem was only with the set schedule, and not at all that he did not want it. Rachel was puzzled to realize that he cared about her and didn't want his words to hurt her. This was the first time Lucian, who looked like a doll, expressed his feelings like this. Then, since the problem was not his dislike for her, but only his schedule, he asked to include her in his schedule. Lucian was stunned. He wanted to say something, but stopped mid-sentence and immediately pressed his lips tightly together. She looked at him as if possessed, because at that moment he had a very cute expression on his face. Not understanding why she was acting so strangely, he simply blinked his eyes, looking at her. Lucian blinked slowly and brought the iced tea to his lips thoughtfully. The heroine, like a true fan, even admired the way he drank. After drinking his tea, he hesitantly asked if she meant for him to include her in his routine and for her to accompany him all day. Rachel was incredibly happy. She really wanted to get up and dance in place. She wanted to ask him to do just that. But in the end, her common sense prevailed, and she replied that she was only asking for time in her schedule when she could come. And then he could pay attention to her. After thinking a little, the hero said that he needed to get permission from his father. When the girl replied that everything was fine and she didn't want to cause trouble, Lucian's eyes widened in surprise. It had only been a month since they met, so she didn't want to rush things because of her desire to develop their relationship as quickly as possible. After she answered, he looked at her and promised that he would ask his father. His belated but positive response made Rachel feel happy again. She stood up, unable to sit still, and her heart beat joyfully with anticipation. Rachel was so happy that she had a bright smile on her face, and her hands were twirling the skirt of her dress. She was so absorbed in joy that she didn't even notice that Lucian had been staring at her the entire time. Suddenly, the Duke tenderly called his beloved daughter. Hearing his father's voice, Lucian jumped up from his seat, but the Duke did not even look in his direction. He gently patted Rachel on the head and said that, according to Amber, her dress was ready and she needed to go to the fitting. Looking at his tender and loving gaze, Lucian only dreamed that he would look at him with the same eyes. He followed his father's instructions in hopes that when he completed the program and became the perfect heir, his father would look at him the same way he looked at Rachel. While he was lost in thought, Rachel suddenly called him. Rachel smiled at him and waved, telling him she had to go. But Lucian did not answer her, but only silently looked after her. When the girl left, the Duke's expression changed abruptly, and he called out to his son in a voice as cold as ice. Lucian looked at his father, who turned to him with hatred in his voice and ordered him to go to the office. When they entered the office, the Duke again began to beat his son, as he was dissatisfied with his communication with Rachel. The Duke, furious, asked Lucian why Rachel continued to seek a meeting with him. Lucian could not answer his father's question, because he also did not know what the reason was. Lucian was exactly like the previous Duke. He had the same eyes as the man who cursed the Duke and Liam, separated them, and ultimately destroyed them. Therefore, the Duke could not allow Lucian, who was like two peas in a pod like his grandfather, to remain near Liam's child. The Duke called Lucian disgusting, accusing him of trying to use the girl against him. With bated breath, Lucian replied, almost choking, that he had never even thought about such a thing. Then the Duke ordered that, in future, he should not indulge her, even if she came herself, and did not think that he could remain near her. As Lucian left his father's office, he thought that he was indeed jealous of Rachel, but he never thought of using her. Barely standing, leaning on the wall, he thought about what he needed to do so that his father would finally notice him. The voice of that creature again sounded in his head, saying that everything was useless, and no matter how hard he tried, nothing would change. The voice convinced the boy that no matter what he did, the Duke would not recognize him. Although Lucian wanted to object, in fact, he also understood that in his father's eyes, he was like a ghost without a shadow. Taking advantage of the boy's despair, the black creature tried to take over his body, promising eternal peace in return. Just when he was about to give up, Rachel's gentle voice rang out, looking at him with a beaming smile. Hearing his name, Lucian came to his senses. He looked in confusion at the little girl in front of him, who continued talking with a smile. She looked at him with her large, dark blue eyes and promised that she would not interfere. Rachel took Lucian's hand and told him she just wanted to walk with him to his room. At that moment, Lucian realized that only one person in this estate noticed him, and he gently squeezed her hand with his large palm. Rachel didn't expect him to take her hand too, and was shocked at first. But after a few seconds, she looked at him tenderly and smiled. To prevent him from changing his mind and withdrawing his hand, she pulled him along with her with a bright smile, calling him to go further. While they walked, the heroine excitedly thought only that her favorite took her hand. Rachel asked the hero if the next item on his schedule was rewriting history books, and he answered in the affirmative. Very soon they were supposed to reach Lucian's room, but the heroine did not want to let go of Lucian's hand. To make the moment last as long as possible, Rachel complained that her legs hurt, after which she looked at him with her shining eyes and asked if they could stop for a while and rest. Seeing that Lucian was lost in thought, she began to worry that he would leave her and leave. But the next second, he dropped to one knee in front of her and gently called her name. The girl was extremely surprised and embarrassed by Lucian's act. She was speechless in amazement. Rachel couldn't believe her luck. Lucian was carrying her on his back. She was incredibly happy. A feeling of delight and happiness overwhelmed her so much that it seemed as if she was going crazy from an excess of emotions. Suddenly, Lucian called Rachel, and she jumped in surprise. He said that they had already reached his room. The heroine was a little disappointed when Lucian let her go to the floor. However, she didn't want to distract him any further, so she smiled and thanked him for reporting. Lucian still hummed emotionlessly and told her to go rest. After saying goodbye, she waved her hand and wished him good luck in the remaining matters. Although she tried to smile, she was sad because she wanted to stay with him longer. Closing the door behind him, Lucian felt the same. He looked at the doors behind which the heroine stood, but did not dare to open them. The hero entered the room and continued to follow his schedule. The next day, Rachel decided to try to visit the Duchess again, and, to her great surprise, the maid said that she asked her to come in. Hearing this, the heroine was very happy that Camilla finally allowed her to greet her. She was happy that her relationship with Lucian and the Duchess had begun to develop. However, she noticed that the maid, despite being adopted by the Duke, still called her by her real name, Erando. Just hearing this made her realize that the Duchess was thinking about her, but she wasn't offended by it. All she wanted was for the Duchess to take care of Lucian. Led by the maid, Rachel entered the room where the Duchess was sitting on the sofa by the window, enjoying the rays of sunlight. The heroine greeted her and introduced herself, saying her name, Rachel de Orlando. Without answering her greeting, the Duchess asked the girl if she knew what a mirage was. Continuing to look out the window, she said that in the country next to the empire, there is a desert, covered entirely with dry sands. The Duchess heard a story from a traveler who fell behind the caravan and wandered alone in the desert for several days. While wandering along the road, a thirsty traveler came across an oasis with clear water right in the middle of the desert. Rushing as hard as he could to the oasis, he scooped up more water, but only coarse sand fell into his mouth. It was an illusion, or in other words, a mirage. Having finished her story, the Duchess asked Rachel what she thought about it. Does she think that mirages only happen in deserts? While the girl looked at her in confusion without waiting for an answer, Camilla said that she hoped that she would never put her head in the sand, mistaking a mirage for an oasis. Hearing these words, the heroine realized that this was a warning, that what she was now enjoying was just a mirage. She realized that with this story, the Duchess warned her not to let her guard down, being deceived by an illusion that would one day disappear. Rachel easily agreed with the Duchess's words, since she also did not plan to stay in this house forever, but only wanted her pet Lucian to find happiness and live the life of an ordinary person, and then she would no longer have anything to regret. So the girl smiled her kindest and most harmless smile that she could, and told Camilla that she needn't worry about it. The heroine originally planned to disappear when this day came. At this time, Lucian was training as usual in the training field under the scorching sun. As usual, Rachel came to him at this time, but today she was not there. Noticing that she was still gone, Lucian thought that perhaps she was a little late. But the dark creature again began to sow doubts in his heart, whispering to him that this child would not always seek a meeting with him because the Duke treated her differently. It told him that she might even take his place as heir. After Rachel spoke with the Duchess, she became convinced that she was not happy about her appearance. Nevertheless, they would have to live under the same roof for some time, so she did not want to conflict with her. Leaving the room, she saw the Duke's assistant, who asked how her meeting with the Duchess went, after which, with a benevolent smile, he said that the Duke was calling her to his place. Rachel was a little surprised, because she didn't know why he could be calling her. As soon as the heroine entered the Duke's office, he joyfully jumped up from his seat and invited his daughter to enter. Coming closer, he with great joy invited her for a walk together. The Duke enthusiastically said that they would go shopping, and he would buy her everything she wanted, and then they would eat delicious desserts from the pastry shop. Of course, she didn't hate the Duke, because he treated her so well, so she happily agreed. Hearing her answer, the Duke took her hand in anticipation and walked forward, calling her to follow him and informing her that the carriage was already waiting for them. However, the heroine wanted Lucian to also enjoy the walk, so she decided to ask the Duke about him. But as soon as she asked him about it, the Duke's expression became cold. The Duke sadly asked if she really didn't want to go for a walk alone with her father. Realizing that they were in too much of a hurry, she replied that she would be happy to take a walk with the Duke alone, but the Duke replied that he would be more happy if his daughter called him Daddy. It wasn't that she didn't like the Duke. In fact, she simply couldn't call him father. Noticing her confusion, the Duke affectionately patted her on the head and told her that everything was fine and that he understood that she was still uncomfortable. The heroine could not help but become attached to the person who smiles at her, sincerely giving her his love. But she understood that it would be difficult for them to become a real family, because later they would all change their feelings. She, of course, felt sad that Lucian would not go with them, but she tightly squeezed the Duke's large and warm hand, and they left together. Lucian had doubts in his heart, and kept thinking that maybe Rachel would actually become the successor. The more he thought about it, the harder it was for him to breathe. Walking along the corridor, he remembered that when he was out of breath, struggling to stay on his feet so as not to fall, two servants suddenly appeared in front of him. The workers were surprised to see the young master in such a state. They looked at each other in confusion, not knowing how to react to this. In the end, they simply walked by, pretending that the hero was not there. After they left, unable to stand on his feet any longer, Lucian collapsed to the floor. At that moment, Rachel suddenly appeared in front of him and asked him worriedly what was hurting him. She was in a panic, not understanding what happened to him and how to help him. Then, Lucian realized that Rachel was different from the others. Remembering that incident, he tried to drive away bad thoughts from himself, convincing himself that Rachel was not like everyone else. At the same time, the dark creature continued to push him towards the cliff of despair, forcing him to doubt the only person close to him. The walk with the Duke turned out to be much more pleasant than expected. First of all, the heroine had something to look at, because she had been in this world for a long time, but she was never able to see everything that was around her. The Duke bought everything Rachel laid eyes on. At the same time, he did not buy anything specific, but bought whatever he wanted, regardless of the price. The Duke bought everything that he thought Rachel might like, and it didn't matter what exactly it was. The main thing was that it suited the color, size, or taste of the Duke. Now the heroine understands how Rachel grew up from the original story and how luxurious her life was. The Duke simply bought whatever the heroine looked at, and if she had not stopped him in the process, there would have been twice as many boxes. Having finished shopping, the Duke invited her to go eat something delicious. Rachel knew that this man would never be her real father, and she saw how cruelly he treated Lucien, but she couldn't help but feel sympathy for him. After training, Lucien returned to his room and began rewriting history books. However, he could not concentrate, as he was still thinking about the fact that Rachel never came to him, and while he was absorbed in the storm of emotions in his head, the paper of which his pen and ink touched turned black. The voice again whispered to him that she would not come again, since she already knew that nothing good should be expected from being close to him. The creature continued to make him depressed, reminding him how pathetic he was and how everyone was ignoring him, including his little sister. Having summed up its speech, it again asked to borrow its body for a while, promising that then everything would change. At the moment when the hero was almost giving up, there was a knock on the door, which distracted him from these depressive thoughts. Lucien turned his head to look at the door, as it slowly opened to reveal Rachel's small face, with a bright smile as she greeted her beloved brother. Making sure that, as she thought, her brother was busy texting in the room, she entered the room, and Lucien's heart began to beat faster as Rachel began to move closer to him. As she came closer, she told Lucien that she had gone for a walk with the Duke and expressed her regrets at not being able to go with him. But in return, she bought a lot of goodies and was happy to share them with Lucien. He couldn't take his eyes off Rachel, who stood with a large basket in her hands. The heroine was happy that when she came to visit the hero, she did not do so empty-handed. Although he did not understand his own emotions, his condition spoke for itself. He was incredibly glad that she had not forgotten about him. At this time, he was always there, although the only one who noticed it was Rachel. His eyes burned with an overabundance of emotions, but he tried to calmly answer that he was there. Rachel was damn happy to see his reaction, and ran up to him and started telling him about the goodies she had brought. First, she suggested trying caramel, and, taking one piece out of the jar, tried to put it in his mouth. To her surprise, this time he agreed rather quickly and opened his mouth. Rachel froze in place in surprise, because she didn't understand why he suddenly became so obedient. Taking this opportunity, she decided to quickly get another caramel to feed him, but Lucien asked to wait a little. He pulled the chair closer so that she could sit down, and he sat down opposite her to make it easier to communicate. The heroine was very happy when she realized that in this way, he allocated time for her in his schedule. Lucien asked her if she had been with her father all day, and Rachel answered in the affirmative, saying that she and the Duke had gone for a walk, after which she happily asked if he really missed her, which greatly embarrassed him. Having received no answer, she admitted that she herself really missed him. Hearing this, Lucien blushed slightly and smiled. Rachel was delighted to see his smile. However, she would be even happier if he smiled wider. Hearing her say that a wide smile would look even cuter, Lucien was surprised. Rachel didn't want to say it out loud, so realizing her mistake and afraid that Lucien would distance himself from her again, she accidentally dropped the basket of sweets. All the desserts she had chosen so carefully ended up on the floor. She wanted to pick them up, but Lucien grabbed her hand and told her to sit down. He did it unconsciously, but when he came to his senses, he was already firmly holding her wrist. Fearing that he might have grabbed too hard and hurt her, he immediately let go of her hand and asked if everything was okay. The heroine was very glad that Lucien cared so much about her. While Lucien picked up the desserts, Rachel continued to mentally praise and admire her favorite. Having finished singing his praises, she offered her help. However, after the fall, all the desserts already looked unsightly. Rachel was very upset as she wanted Lucien to try them, Initially, they were beautiful, but now they looked unpresentable and unappetizing. Seeing how upset she was, Lutzman tried to calm her down. He thanked her with a smile as he understood how hard she had tried for him. His dazzling smile embarrassed the heroine, and she, blushing, replied that he had nothing to thank her for. He also promised that he would definitely get permission from his father to spend time with her, and that he will certainly add it to his routine. Rachel was immensely happy that Lucian remembered her request. She smiled beautifully again and replied that she would look forward to it. The heroine was very happy that the current Lucian was not at all like that crazy tyrant from the book. Although the appearance of the cakes had deteriorated, this should not have affected the taste, so she again began to feed her brother. She wanted to achieve a happy ending for herself and her pet at any cost. Night fell, and the city was shrouded in darkness. After finishing her conversation with Lucian, Rachel returned to her room. The stupid smile did not leave her face, since the shining smile of his pet was still standing before her eyes. She thought that she had nothing more to wish for, but suddenly she remembered that there was something. Now she was eager to see Lucian and Noah live a happy life. In the original, the two met an unhappy end. Although they loved each other, they could not avoid the misunderstandings accumulated due to lack of communication, and several canon characters who were in love with Noah only fueled these misunderstandings. Comparing her age and Lucian's age, the heroine came to the conclusion that the original story she knew had already begun. The main culprit of the tragic end of the novel, and the most significant secondary character, Oscar, was soon to appear. In the original, the hero, having killed everyone on his way, went to his beloved. He slowly walked towards the bed where his beloved Noah lay. Lucian gently stroked Noah's golden hair. Looking at his lifeless body, Lucian asked how he could live without him. Then, without the slightest regret or hesitation, he followed his beloved, plunging the sword into his chest. Seeing the death of her pet, Rachel woke up sharply, feeling a rapid heartbeat and breathing. Realizing that it was just a dream, she felt relieved. At the end of the original story, after Noah's death, Lucian ended his own life. The heroine could not allow Lucian to die, because at all costs she was determined to change the end. Rachel wanted to achieve an ending where Lucian and Noah found happiness, and she calmly left the Leon family. After the girl left, Lucian continued to look at the jar of caramel candies for a while. Having woken up, the heroine first hurried to her pet, taking with her a huge basket. At this time, Lucian was training alone in the training field as usual. When he saw Rachel, he was delighted and greeted her with a smile. His smile was so pure and innocent, like an angel, that seeing him, the heroine was convinced again and again that her favorite was an example of a caring guy. Walking closer, Rachel announced that she had brought iced tea and cookies today, after which, with a smile, she offered to sit in the shade and eat together. Lucian was a little confused as he was scheduled to train. Noticing his confusion, Rachel hastened to clarify that it would only take 5 to 10 minutes, and a short break would even be useful during training. Also, in order to reassure Lucian, she added that if the Duke noticed them, she would say that it was she who persuaded him. Hearing about his father, Lucian remembered how furious he had been when he had simply asked to include Rachel in his routine. After that conversation, the Duke again punished his son for inappropriate behavior. Remembering that day, Lucian began to have headaches, and Rachel, who had been standing nearby all this time, became worried when she noticed her brother's poor health. Since the hero had an unhealthy complexion, she still urgently asked for a little rest. Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed his hand and pulled him along, saying that they must urgently go into the shadows. She was sure that the reason for Lucian's poor health was his terrible schedule. Looking at Rachel now, the hero realized that she was very different from the person he imagined when he first met. She did not ignore him and did not try to hurt him. On the contrary, she showed sympathy for him and sincerely cared. This was the first time someone loved him so much, so he wanted to see her more often and for longer. As they sat down on the bench, Rachel suggested that Lucian drink some iced tea first. She continued to ask about his well-being and whether he needed rest, but the hero calmly replied that it was just a little dizziness. To make sure that Lucian did not get sick, the heroine decided to check if he had a fever. Her careless touch confused the hero, and he abruptly pulled away, saying that it was all because of the heat. Hearing this, the heroine calmed down a little, but still asked the hero not to overwork himself. After he drank the tea, Rachel suggested he try the cookies too. Their pleasant time was interrupted by Amber, who was looking for the young lady. The maid told Rachel that the Duke was looking for her. She didn't know what the Duke wanted this time, and she didn't want to leave her pet. But she couldn't ignore the Duke's request. Nevertheless, she had to go to the Duke, but before leaving, she told Lucian that he could leave everything here, and she would come back and clean it up later. She smiled and waved goodbye to her brother, wishing him successful training, after which she and her servants headed towards the Duke. At that moment, Lucian realized how different his position was from that of his father. The Duke was able to see Rachel whenever he wanted, while he had difficulty finding time for meetings. The Duke, as usual, greeted his beloved daughter, without hiding his joy. Then he invited her into the room to show her his new purchases. He said his order was delivered today and wanted to show it to Rachel. When the Duke removed the sovan, underneath it was a cage in which sat a rare fox from the Beastman race, who was trembling with fear. Seeing him, she realized how accurate Lucian's phrase was when he described the fox as a snow-white cloud falling from the sky. Rachel immediately realized that Oscar was a minor character in the novel. The main form of the Beast People race was bestial, but upon reaching puberty, they could turn into humans. They had the same mental abilities as humans, but in the Leon's Empire, the Beast People were treated worse than ever. People kidnapped them and sold them as pets or slaves, and the real Rachel also received a gift from Duke Oscar, purchased in the same way. That Rachel was no different from other people and mocked him in every possible way. Naturally, after this, Oscar fell in love with Noah, who treated everyone with warmth. Oscar later escaped, taking Noah with him, who was captured by Lucian, and Lucian believed that Noah got close to him in order to fool him. Lucian recaptured Noah and imprisoned him in a room where not a ray of light could penetrate. After being transformed into Lucian's personal doll, Noah ultimately committed suicide. Rachel felt a little bad when she saw this little furball shaking in fear. Oscar added fuel to the sad ending, so the heroine didn't like him. However, he looked very cute in person. The Duke was incredibly happy when Rachel was delighted with her gift and thanked him. Looking at the cute little creature in front of her, the heroine decided that from now on, she would take care of him. Unlike the real Rachel, the heroine said with joy in her voice that she had come up with a name for this baby. The fox was shocked to hear that the girl wanted to call him Lump. The Duke also approved of her idea and smiled when he saw the joy on her face. The heroine wanted to change the plot, which is why she gave him a new name. Rachel smiled tenderly at the fox, who looked at her with a surprised look and offered to make friends. After this, the Duke invited Rachel to look at the second purchase. It was a falcon that is used for hunting. Rachel couldn't contain her admiration when she saw this majestic bird. Looking at the falcon, Rachel immediately decided to name him Damien. The fox was annoyed to realize that the girl who came up with such a wonderful name called him Lump. However, despite the fox's displeasure, Rachel was not going to give in and thought that the name Lump sounded cute. Suddenly, she noticed a collar on the fox's neck and told the Duke that this thing looked very tight. The Duke explained to her that this was a magical device in the form of a collar. He said that the collar was created by a high-level magician, and only stronger magic could destroy it. The Duke explained to her that falcons have been trained since childhood, so there will be no problems with him. But foxes are wild animals and can resist, and if the fox attacks her, the collar will squeeze its throat. After listening to him, the heroine thought that this was too cruel a method of taming. Rachel felt sorry for this cute little creature, but the Duke warned her not to trust the beast, since it was impossible to predict when it would show its teeth to its owner. The heroine understood that he was right, because in the original, Oscar betrayed the Duke and Rachel and ran away, but still, she felt uneasy. Lucian's training time has come to an end. After training, he began to look at the entrance to the mansion to see when his little sister would arrive. However, Rachel showed up just like that. Therefore, he decided that this time he would go to her himself. During this time, Rachel spent time with her new pet. She tenderly pronounced the name of Lump, and he, curled up in the corner, did not pay attention to her calls. Rachel didn't know what to do, since little Lump didn't want to get out from under the bed. She addressed him with kind words, begged, and even tried to persuade him, but everything was in vain. Then, she decided to lure him with delicious food. She offered him candies that even beastmen could eat. His large red eyes, sparkling like precious stones, moved restlessly, and he looked at the unfamiliar candy with disbelief. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to try the candy. The unfamiliar taste was delicious. He liked the new taste so much that he swallowed the candy whole. The heroine was happy to see him eating candy. She excitedly asked if he liked the treat and if he wanted more. This was the first time Lucian stood at Rachel's door, as usually the girl found and visited him herself. Gathering his courage, he was about to knock, when suddenly a loud scream was heard from the room. He burst into the room in a panic to check what happened to Rachel. Rachel was sitting on the floor, and next to her lay the fox, who had received a blow from the collar. Realizing that the fox was trying to harm his little sister, Lucian grabbed him by the throat, as if trying to strangle him. But Rachel hastened to stop him. After such an attitude, the fox was completely disappointed in people, because he thought that they were all the same. They pretended to give me food, and then locked me in a terrible place and beat me. The fox thought that this time everything was the same, and Rachel only pretended to give the treat. And when he approached, she was about to strike. And when Lucian grabbed him by the throat, he thought that it was Rachel who ordered him to be killed. Suddenly, the girl rushed to her brother and asked him to let Lump go. Lucian was taken aback by this request, as he believed that the fox had attacked her. But Rachel explained that he was just scared when she unexpectedly touched him. Hearing her request, Lucian agreed to let him go. However, unexpectedly, the hero headed to the window, intending to throw the fox out into the street, but Rachel stopped him. She explained that these pets were a gift from the Duke. Only after her words did Lucian notice that in addition to the fox, there was also a falcon in the room. Having learned that his father had brought these kids, Lucian agreed to let the fox go. The fox immediately ran and hid under the bed. Lucian couldn't understand why his father gave such a gift, and Rachel explained to him that they were beastmen. After petting the falcon, she said that now they are still small, but when they grow up, they will protect her. But Lucian was unhappy with such protectors, because one of them had recently attacked her. But Rachel explained that it was her mistake since she unexpectedly touched him. The hero did not like this explanation, and he said that he could protect her instead of them. Rachel was surprised to hear her brother say this, but at the same time, she was happy and admired him. Despite her delight at such an offer, the heroine understood that Lucian was already very busy. After all, he had to inherit the title of Duke, and importantly, build a relationship with Noah. Lucian himself understood that he had very little free time, but still he was sad from the realization of this fact. Suddenly, Rachel wondered why Lucian came to her room. The hero replied that he wanted to return her suitcase. Rachel thanked him, as she had completely forgotten about it. The heroine asked Lucian if he would now return to his routine, but Lucian was worried about her and did not want to leave her alone with the animals. Rachel again said that everything was fine and explained that the recent incident was due to her carelessness, after which she again treated the fox with candy. She apologized to him and promised that she would not touch him again without permission. But the fox still did not trust her and was dissatisfied with the strange name she gave him. The fox accepted the treat, but decided never to go outside again. Rachel was glad that he was taking food from her hands. Their communication was interrupted by a falcon who was hungry. She stroked it gently and asked Amber to bring the meat. Rachel treated Demian to meat and placed a plate of raw chicken next to Lump, since she understood that he would not be satisfied with candy alone. Lump's mouth watered at the sight of meat. Rachel was delighted when she saw that the fox was eating the meat with gusto. All this time, Lucian watched Rachel, who was delighted with her pets. He was saddened by the knowledge that he would now have to share his little sister, not only with the Duke, but also with these creatures. While he was thinking, Rachel suddenly took his hand and suggested that they have a snack together. She brought Lucian grapes and told him that he needed to eat, at least a little, before returning to his studies, because it was difficult to concentrate on an empty stomach. The heroine tried to make her pet feel comfortable, while he just wanted to be close to her. Noticing that he was in no hurry to fade away, Rachel began to feed him again. She started singing the nursery rhyme again, waiting for Lucian to open his mouth. The hero smiled slightly and opened his mouth slightly. It seemed that he was already accustomed to this behavior of Rachel. After a week, the beastmen had already become accustomed to their new habitat, and Rachel began to spend time with them outside and for walks. She arranged a competition between a hawk and a fox. She praised the winner and treated them to treats, thereby training and taming them. To cheer up the loser, she also gave him a small piece of candy. Lucian watched from afar as his little sister trained her falcon and fox. He worried that she might have come to love her animals much more than she loved him. Noticing her brother, Rachel ran up to him and offered to try training the animals too, explaining what exactly needed to be done. Rachel explained that the winner is determined by who brings the disc first. The falcon and fox were ready, awaiting Lucian's attack. After listening to the heroine's explanations, Lucian threw the disc towards the forest with all his might. Demian and Kamachek immediately rushed after him, trying to get ahead of each other. Rachel was worried, thinking that perhaps the hero had gone too far. But Lucian distracted her from her thoughts and suggested that she rest in the shade because the sun was very hot. The heroine happily agreed, since her arm was already hurting from throwing the discus. While they were sitting on the bench, she spoke with delight about her little animals, about what they were like and what they became. She was especially glad that she was able to win the fox's trust. She also liked that the seemingly majestic Demian was actually cute and constantly clung to her. While talking about her pets, Rachel suddenly thought that maybe the kids wouldn't be able to find the disc because it had flown very far away. Lucian was unpleasant that even while with him, the heroine continued to think about those animals. Rachel, carried away by her stories, did not even notice this and was surprised when the hero reminded her that she was now with him. She looked at him in confusion, not understanding what exactly he was trying to say. Demian and Kamachek returned faster than Rachel thought, and this time the fox won. But the falcon did not want to admit defeat and pushed the fox so that he did not have time to get to Rachel. As a result, a fight broke out between them, and the heroine ran towards them to stop the quarrel. In the end, they only calmed down after Rachel promised to give a reward to both of them. Lucian stood back again and watched them, thinking that it would be better if these beasts disappeared into the forest. Suddenly, the Duke's voice was heard calling Rachel. The Duke, without hiding his happiness, came up and praised the heroine for still playing with the beast people today. He walked past his son, ignoring him as if he were invisible. The Duke was relieved to learn that his daughter liked obedient and cute babies. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he coldly asked Lucian why he was not at training. The Duke scolded him for skipping school. Rachel became worried that the Duke would punish Lucian again, and suddenly interrupted their conversation, explaining that his brother had only come because he was worried about her. She asked the Duke not to scold Lucian, and he smiled again and gently stroked her head, trying to calm her down. Since Rachel was nearby, the Duke only told his son to return to the training ground. Lucian could not contradict his father, so he had to leave Rachel. The Duke again lovingly turned to the heroine with a request to give him some time. He said that since she had said that she wanted to buy toys for the Beastmen, they would go buy them together. Having said this, the Duke sent Rachel and Amber to change clothes. Although Rachel wanted to stay with Lucian longer, she had to say goodbye to him. Lucian also wanted to spend time with her, so that no one would interfere, and the time would be entirely given to only the two of them. After changing, Rachel went shopping with the Duke. She chose products for her babies very carefully. The Duke, in turn, only asked if she liked this or that product. As soon as she answered that she liked something, the Duke immediately bought it. It didn't matter to him whether this thing was needed or not. He just wanted to make his daughter happy. When the Duke suggested that they look at something else, Rachel refused because she believed that he had already purchased more than he needed. The Duke gently took her hand and invited her to go to the carriage. At that moment, the heroine felt that she seemed to have become younger, not only in body, but also in soul. It was hard to believe that such a kind man could treat Lucian so cruelly. The heroine was confused, not knowing how she should treat the Duke. It would be easier for her if the Duke treated her the same way he treated Lucian. Noticing that the girl sighed often, the Duke asked if she needed anything else. He was ready to fulfill any of her requests. More than anything, she wanted to ask him to be kind to Lucian. But at the same time, she understood that it was too early to talk about it, so she tactfully refused, saying that she already had everything. The Duke noticed that Rachel could not express herself freely and decided that she was still uncomfortable around him. Every time, just watching her, the Duke was immersed in happy memories of Liam. He wanted to take care of a child who looked just like Liam because he felt he owed him something. Doing something for her was like paying off the debt of his heart. Hearing these words, the heroine came to her senses, again remembering that the Duke adopted her only because he felt guilty before Liam. She reminded herself that this concern was not directed at her, but at the real Rachel. The duchy's workers were already discussing Madame Rachel's beastmen with all their might. In their eyes, the little lady with the little beast people looked very cute. As Lucian walked past the maids, he heard them discussing how wherever Rachel went, the beastmen always accompanied her. Hearing that Rachel was spending so much time with them made Lucian sad. Rachel was with them not only during his training. Whenever he saw her, she was always in the company of these animals. They were together in the morning, at lunch, and even in the evening, while Rachel's meetings with Lucian lasted nothing at all. On the other hand, Lucian avoided Rachel every time because of the routine. The hero plunged into darkness again, and disturbing thoughts that Rachel had new toys, therefore she had no reason to hang out with him, gripped his mind. The dark creature continued to whisper that to Rachel he was just one of many toys. There was emptiness in Lucian's eyes again. Despite Rachel's opinion of him, all Lucian wanted was for her to stay by his side. Lucian believed that the problem was her beastmen. They may have looked tame now, but they are wild animals. The hero was worried that someday they might change and attack Rachel. His heart was uneasy, and if he could not separate Rachel from the beast people, then all he could do was be by her side. Arriving in her room, Rachel happily showed the beastmen her purchases. She invited them to take turns opening the boxes and seeing what was inside. While she was talking about shopping, Kamochik brought in a jar of sweets. Kamochik and Demian looked at her with their big, shining eyes, asking her to give them a few pieces. She told them it was bad for her teeth, but they continued to sweetly cling to her, hoping for a concession. In the end, she agreed to give them, but only one each. She was glad to see with what pleasure they were eating these sweets. The real Rachel had a bad relationship with the beastmen. The heroine was glad that she managed to receive this affection herself. As Rachel lived her life, she was glad to have met these animals, whose sincere love was directed only towards her. Realizing that his busy schedule meant he couldn't spend enough time with Rachel, Lucian decided to talk to his father. The Duke was surprised by his son's visit and asked about the reasons for his coming. Lucian communicated his desire to include Rachel in his schedule. He asked to make time in his schedule to meet with Rachel. The Duke resolutely refused this request, as he was categorically against their meetings with Rachel. Lucian explained that he was worried about her safety and wanted to make sure the beastmen didn't harm her. But the Duke was sure that they were just pets, and there would be no danger. He ordered Lucian to put useless thoughts out of his head and focus on the lessons of the air. After some time, Rachel decided to organize a hunting competition between Demian and Kamachak. She decided to use the highest quality meat as a prize. After explaining all the rules to them, Rachel announced the start of the competition and sent them into the forest to hunt. When the animals went into the forest, the heroine began to think about whether Lucian was training now. Suddenly, Lucian appeared right in front of her. Noticing him, Rachel quickly ran up to him and greeted him. Although the heroine was glad to see him, but, knowing his busy schedule, she asked if he could really visit her so often, to which he replied that everything was fine. Rachel was puzzled to realize that he cared about her, and that was why he visited so often. She was immensely happy about this and thanked him. In response, Lucian unexpectedly apologized and said that he had not yet been able to get permission for time together in his schedule. But the heroine was already very happy that Lucian had not forgotten her request and was ready to wait as long as necessary. She told Lucian that the kids had gone hunting and suggested they take a walk together to the training area. When they got there, Rachel asked Lucian if he would come see her after training so they could return home together. The hero smiled slightly and agreed. Having agreed with Lucian, she wished him successful training and returned to the beast people. The hero's facial expression changed significantly after she left. Looking after her, he thought that it would be better if these animals did not return at all, and then Rachel would be his only. Lucian's fleeting thoughts made him feel ashamed. Shaking his head to regain his composure, Lucian returned to his training. He wanted to become the ideal heir to firmly demand a change in his routine. When Rachel returned, she saw that no one had returned yet. She decided to pour water for them in advance, so that when they returned, they could quench their thirst. Hearing some sounds, she raised her head and saw that a white fox, returning from the forest, had dragged someone along with it, running back in fear. She was trying to break away from her pursuer. Seeing this, Rachel screamed in horror and, stumbling, fell back. Hearing her scream, Lucian quickly ran towards her, worried that his little sister might have gotten hurt. Seeing his little sister in danger, Lucian instinctively moved forward. Lucian pushed the girl out of the way of the wild boar in time, but they both fell, and Lucian injured his arm. Despite this, the hero did not take his eyes off the wild boar. Noticing that he was preparing to attack, Lucian told Rachel to run in the other direction. Lucian stood up and ran towards the boar. Rachel called after him worriedly, trying to stop him. Lucian had never heard a voice that sounded like this. He felt worry and anxiety in it. The brief uneasiness quickly went away, and Lucian, who was looking in the direction of the boar, jumped up, attacking. He kept his eyes on the wild boar and plunged his sword into its body without hesitation. The heavy body of the boar went limp. Rachel called out to Lucian in a worried voice. The scent of blood seemed to cause Lucian's eyes to flicker. For a moment, the heroine thought that the cruel hero from the webtoon was standing in front of her. Having caught its prey, the falcon proudly returned. As he flew closer, the first thing he saw was a huge boar next to Rachel. Out of shock, the falcon dropped the rabbit it was carrying in its paws. Rachel stared at Lucian in shock for a moment. She only came to her senses after Lucian called her several times. As Lucian came closer, she noticed a wound on his arm. With a worried and shocked face, she asked if he was okay, trying to help in any way. Tears sparkled brightly in the sun, filling the corners of her eyes, and her beautiful emerald hair shook with fear. She rather called her brother with her to heal the wound. She also told the kids that they were coming back. As they walked, Rachel nudged Lucian to walk faster because she was worried about his injury. Unexpectedly or not, he definitely liked it. Lucian had the feeling that complete chaos reigned in his soul. When Rachel returned to the room, Amber asked if she was okay. In response, Rachel proudly told her how bravely Lucian had rushed to save her. The maid was glad that Lucian was nearby at that moment. Amber also told the heroine that Lucian was also fine and had no serious injuries. Rachel couldn't believe she had put her pet in danger and felt she didn't deserve to be his fan. Lucian reminded her of herself. So from the very beginning of her rebirth, she wanted him to be happy. It seemed that if the hero became happy, then she would find her consolation in this. Therefore, the heroine prayed to be able to change the sad ending of the original. But at that moment, his cold golden eyes looked at Rachel, but at the same time did not see, as if she was not there. His appearance reminded her of the last scene of the main plot. Suddenly, the Duke's loud voice interrupted her thoughts. The worried Duke burst into the room and asked in a grim voice if she was all right. Looking at his face, the heroine realized that he already knew about what happened at lunch and tried to calm him down. However, no matter how hard she tried to show that she was okay, the Duke still felt guilty towards Liam. Rachel immediately realized that this was her opportunity and told the Duke that it was Lucian who saved her. The Duke blamed himself for not listening to Lucian's words about the beastmen earlier. Since these scoundrel beasts were the culprits of this incident, the Duke decided that he must personally deal with them. Seeing how surprised Rachel was, the Duke explained to her that this was necessary, since they had put her in danger. Rachel was horrified to hear that the Duke was going to eliminate them. Although she didn't like the fox's action, she didn't think that the falcon and the fox deserved to die, so she hurried to stop him. She asked the Duke for permission to settle the issue with the beastmen herself. Rachel insisted that she should be the one to take responsibility for them as their owner. She wanted to fulfill her duties towards them to the end. The Duke had nothing to say to her arguments, so he allowed her to act as she pleased. Taking this opportunity, she also added that she would like to thank Lucian as well. Looking at him, the heroine carefully continued and explained that her brother very coolly killed the boar and saved her life. She specifically described it as if she had not seen anything exciting than this. The Duke, who listened to her story, calmly nodded to her words without saying a word. Rachel was extremely surprised when the Duke decided to give him leave as a reward, because Lucian was his son and not a mercenary. But the Duke also added that she could come up with the rest of the reward herself. Returning to his room, Lucian was still worried about Rachel, because they had not seen each other since returning home. He wondered if he should check in with her briefly to make sure she was okay. While he was lost in thought, someone knocked on the door. Having received permission, the servant entered the room and said that he had come to convey the Duke's words. The Duke released him from the afternoon schedule and gave him the day off. It would seem that Lucian should have been happy with these words, but he was disappointed because the visitor was not Rachel. The servant also said that the Duke was inviting him to a dinner party, after which he added that if Lucian was ready, he could go straight to the table. Hearing these words, the hero was inspired, thinking that perhaps Rachel would also be with them. During his first dinner with Rachel, Lucian wished she didn't exist, but now everything was different. He was looking forward to meeting her. He would be glad to see Rachel at the table. That's all he wanted at the moment. 3 people were sitting at the festive table: Rachel, the Duke, and his son. But the Duke continued to ignore Lucian's presence and looked only at Rachel with a gentle gaze. The heroine tried to at least a little dispel the situation and help them get closer. But, like his father, Lucian also looked only at Rachel with tenderness. The Duke turned his gaze to Lucian, as if he wanted to say something. The Duke sighed and turned to Lucian, which surprised him greatly. For the first time, he did not scold, but praised Lucian for saving Rachel. The Duke also said that as a reward, Lucian would receive a day off, which he could spend as he wanted. Lucian's face remained expressionless as he spoke to his father, but as soon as he looked at Rachel, a gentle smile appeared on his lips. The Duke added that he had more news. He said that a ball would soon be held in the imperial palace. The Duke decided that he, Rachel, and Lucian would participate on behalf of their family. The heroine was very glad that from now on, she would be able to attend balls with her brother and eat together at the same table. Although the Duke did not mean this, but, looking at her shining eyes, he could not refuse her. He agreed to do as Rachel wished. Hearing this, she smiled broadly at the Duke and thanked him. Looking at her bright smile, Lucian also couldn't help but smile. The next morning, Lucian woke up early and, as usual, got himself in order. Usually, Lucian would be training at this time, but today was his day off, and he was just walking around the room in circles, not knowing what to do. Sitting by the window, Lucian thought about what he would like to do. Suddenly, Lucian heard a knock on the door. It was Rachel. A smile immediately appeared on his face, and he hurried to open the door. Seeing Rachel on the threshold, he immediately invited her into the room. When Lucian opened the door, Rachel smiled at him with her unique smile and wished him good morning. She entered the room without hesitation and, having received his permission, sat down next to him, and then she asked if his wound hurt. Although Lucian replied that there was nothing serious, Rachel could not calm down so easily and asked to see the wound. She was worried that if she didn't pay attention to the wound, it might get bigger. Therefore, the heroine brought iodine with her to treat his wound. At that moment, Lucian was very happy to see his sister's eyes looking at him. After treating the wound with iodine, Rachel bandaged her arm. Lucian thanked her and smiled his bright smile, which suited his appearance very well, and his gaze did not contain the indifference and indifference that he usually showed to other people. Noticing changes in the hero's mood, the heroine thought that it was all because of the day off, because every person needs rest. After finishing treating the wound, Rachel took Lucian's hand and suggested they go have breakfast together. This time, only the 2 of them sat at the large table, because the Duke left early in the morning on business for the duchy. The maid said that the Duke would not be at breakfast and left, and she also added that if they needed anything, they could ring the bell. The heroine was even a little glad that she would have breakfast alone with her pet. Lucian also felt more comfortable in his father's absence. Taking advantage of the fact that the Duke was not around, Rachel tried to fatten up her pet. Lucian, in turn, tried to put food on Rachel's plate. He wanted them to enjoy delicious food together. The heroine was incredibly glad that her favorite was not the tyrant from the book, but a caring guy. While they were eating, she asked what he planned to do on his long-awaited day off. Lucian didn't have any ideas. He just wanted to spend this time with his sister. In the eyes of his devoted admirer, Lucian seemed very sweet. Having answered her question, Lucian asked a counter-question about what she was going to do after breakfast. Rachel's expression changed dramatically. She answered with a sad voice that she was going to say goodbye to the beast people. After breakfast, Rachel asked the servant to bring a cage with a fox and a falcon. When he brought the beastmen, she thanked him and released him, saying that she would be with her brother. Looking at them, the heroine thought that most likely they had suffered a lot. She tried to say something, but the beastmen began whining and flapping their wings and stuck to the wall of the cage. She had no choice but to give them freedom. When Rachel opened the lock, they carefully walked out of the cage. They joyfully rushed to their owner, as if trying to say something. Rachel asked them to calm down a little. She then gave them something to eat, assuming that they had not been fed all this time. The kids ate the meat with pleasure, gobbling it up on both cheeks. This was the last time the heroine could feed them. Looking at the tight collar, Rachel wanted to take it off, but didn't know how. Seeing his sister's worried look, Lucian asked what happened. Rachel said that Lump has a restraining collar on his neck. It's a magical device, and she doesn't know how to remove it. Then Lucian offered his help. The heroine was surprised at this proposal, because she did not know how exactly he could help. She was shocked when Lucian walked over and removed the collar without much difficulty. Rachel didn't know that her brother could use magic. She clearly remembered that, in the original, Lucian did not use magic. According to her memories, Lucian was a swordmaster, not a magician at all. Even in the original, when Noah asked to remove Oscar's collar, he called a magician to solve the problem. Having compared all the available information, the heroine came to the conclusion that due to the fact that she changed the plot, Lucian's hidden attitudes were revealed. As an ardent fan of Lucian, Rachel quickly accepted this news, since usually mad tyrants, as characters, are talented in everything. Seeing the joyful expression on the girl's face, Lucian came closer and asked with a smile if she was happy now. Without hesitation, she responded positively and thanked me. Lucian was glad to see the happiness in Rachel's eyes. Their conversation was interrupted by the beastmen, who had finished eating. Seeing that the plates were already empty, Rachel gently patted them one last time, after which she informed them that now they would have to separate, since otherwise the Duke might get rid of them. Hearing her words, the kids shuddered. Standing up, she said that now they were free and should quickly run away and live a free life. The Lump looked up at her, whining, and his red, jewel-like eyes sparkled brightly in the sun. Instead of hugging Lump, she turned to Demian, telling him to fly as far away from here as possible. She also asked him to give the fox a lift to some suitable place. The Lump began to rub under her feet, begging her to hug him, but Demian grabbed him and flew up. Listening to the cries of the little white lump, Rachel raised her head. Watching the two disappear far into the sky, the heroine consoled herself with the fact that this was for the best, because if Oscar and Lucian were separated, the events of the original story could not happen. But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself that everything was for the best, tears involuntarily rolled from her eyes. Seeing her crying, Lucian became worried. Although it did not last long, she managed to become very attached to them. Lucian was at a loss. He didn't know what to do or how to console her, so he just gently hugged the girl to calm her down a little. Looking at her, he said softly that she still had him. When Rachel calmed down, they walked back to the mansion together. As they walked, Rachel remembered that Lucian had the day off today and suggested they quickly get through the training area. Suddenly, she noticed the Duchess. Camilla, as usual, was sitting in her room by the window, but Rachel seemed to be looking in their direction. Remembering that the Duchess was always looking out the window when meeting her, the heroine understood the reason. Camilla looked at the training area where Lucian was training. As Rachel suddenly became quiet and stopped, Lucian asked what happened. Then, unexpectedly, the girl asked how often he saw the Duchess. Lucian replied that she was unwell, so they could not see each other. Hearing this, she felt sad that the Duchess was only secretly watching her son. Lucian had difficulty communicating not only with the Duke, but also with the Duchess. However, it looked like the Duchess had feelings for Lucian. The gears in Rachel's head began to spin, trying to figure out a way to help them get closer. She finally came up with something and asked her brother if he liked to cook, after which she invited him to make cookies together, and they went to the kitchen. Rachel decided that if they baked cookies together, they would turn out especially delicious, and they could treat them to the Duchess. Lucian was very surprised, but agreed. They started cooking and started with the dough. Lucian kneaded the dough easily, while Rachel struggled with her bowl. So, after finishing his part of the work, Lucian helped Rachel knead her dough. The second step in Rachel's recipe was to divide the dough into equal portions, after which they decorated the dough with chocolate chips and almonds. Next, the dough needed to be baked in the oven, and Rachel entrusted Amber with this task. Finally, all they had to do was wait for the dough to bake. After a while, Amber brought the finished cookies to Rachel's room, where the guys were waiting for her. The chocolate chip almond cookies were ready. Rachel ordered the maid to divide the cookies into 2 portions and give one to the Duchess. She then took one cookie, walked over to Lucian, and invited him to try it first. Instead, Lucian broke the cookie in half and invited Rachel to try it together. Rachel sat down next to Lucian, and they began to eat at the same time. The heroine really liked the cookies. She especially liked that she and Lucian baked them together. The hero also thought the cookies were delicious and agreed with her. Then Rachel wondered if the Duchess would like their creation. Lucian answered hesitantly that it was possible. The heroine mentally prayed that the sweetness of the cookies they had prepared would at least slightly dispel the sadness in the Duchess's soul. The hero asked Rachel what they would do after finishing the cookies. He wanted to know how she usually spends her time. Rachel didn't know what to answer, because apart from following Lucian's routine, she didn't do anything else, so she was toiling around with boredom. However, after the appearance of the beastmen, she became much more cheerful. Remembering them, she became sad again. Noticing this, Lucian lightly nudged her cheek with his finger, as if to remind her that he was nearby. And it helped. Rachel remembered that her favorite was with her, and immediately perked up. She told Lucian that she used to just wander around, looking around the estate, after which she invited him to have lunch together in a beautiful garden. At this time, Amber handed the plate of cookies to the Duchess's maid. Camilla, as usual, was sitting on the sofa by the window. Entering the room, the maid said that Rachel had sent her cookies. She also clarified that the lady and the young master prepared it together. The Duchess was shocked by this information. While Camilla was confused, the maid carefully placed the cookies on the table next to her. The Duchess noticed that Lucian had changed recently, thanks to Rachel. Amber carefully combed her young mistress's hair. Having finished tying the beautiful bow, the maid announced that the look was complete. Rachel thanked with a smile. She was very excited as she was in the imperial capital to attend the imperial ball. It was her first ball, so she was looking forward to it. As Rachel finished her preparations, Lucian came to pick her up, wearing elegant and rather elaborate clothes that were very different from his usual and shabby clothes. He said that they were already paired in the carriage. Lucian gently took her hand, and they went to the ball together. The majestic palace was shrouded in mysterious twilight, which creates an atmosphere of magic and mystery. At the ball in the palace, beautifully dressed aristocrats gathered. The men were in elegant suits, complemented by exquisite jewelry and expensive accessories, and the ladies shone in luxurious dresses, emphasizing their grace and femininity. When the master of ceremonies announced the arrival of Pedro, Lucian, and Rachel de Leon, everyone present turned their gaze to the entrance. The Duke's family entered the ballroom majestically, like royalty arriving at a celebration. The Duke walking proudly in front, his posture straight and his gaze confident, followed by Lucian and Rachel, each carrying their share of grandeur and nobility. Rachel was incredibly happy and proud of how dazzling her pet looked, while at the same time Lucian felt uncomfortable. All eyes were fixed on them, and the guests animatedly discussed their appearance. Lucian could clearly hear the guests discussing all the members of his family. Many aristocrats believed that the Duke would not recognize Lucian as his heir. Noticing Lucian's distant look, Rachel became worried because she didn't understand the reason for his upset. While the Duke was talking with other aristocrats, Rachel stared at Lucian, not knowing how to help him. The Duke needed to discuss some matters with other nobles, so he told Rachel that he would go away for a moment to talk. After the Duke left, she called out to Lucian, but noticed that he did not respond. The hero stood motionless and looked blankly at one point. Seeing how tense he was, Rachel assumed it was because of the unfamiliar surroundings. But before she could say a word, a young aristocrat approached her to introduce herself. A girl with fiery red hair and green eyes made a beautiful curtsy and introduced herself as Valisa, from the family of the Marquis of Bernu. Rachel also greeted Valisa politely and introduced herself. After the greeting, the girl asked Rachel to accompany her, because due to her young age, she was left alone. The heroine was looking for suitable words to refuse her, because she was worried about her brother. Rachel didn't want to leave Lucian, but he asked her to go with Valisa. Lucian said this and left to get some fresh air. Rachel looked after him, not knowing what to do or what to say. Lucian had another attack, had difficulty breathing, and barely made it to the bench, where he sat down. His mind was once again plunged into darkness, and he was lost in a restless whirlwind of thoughts. The devil's whisper told him that Rachel would take everything from him. The dark entity instilled fear, anxiety, and mistrust into his heart, and then offered its help. The voice said that over the past 1,000 years, Lucian was his only successor, with whom he, the great magician, was on the same wavelength. He invited him to join forces to take revenge on this world together. He was brought out of his deep trance by the voice of Rachel, who ran towards him worriedly. Running up to him, she said that she was worried, so she followed him and asked if everything was okay. Lowering his eyes, he replied that everything was fine now. Lucian shared with his sister that he felt uncomfortable being in a crowded place, and learned that she felt the same way. She also felt uncomfortable in that environment, so she suggested staying alone until the end of the ball and then returning home. Feeling how much Rachel cared for him, Lucian began to doubt the words of the dark entity, because it was obvious that it was not trying to take anything away from him. Suddenly, music was heard from the banquet hall, and Rachel assumed that the ball had already begun. Looking at her handsome gentleman, the heroine noted that it would be a pity to miss the dance, because they had dressed up so beautifully, so she decided that they should dance too. She then stood in front of Lucian and, following the rules of etiquette, asked him to dance. At that moment, illuminated by the radiance of moonlight, she seemed like a beautiful fairy, and the hero, blinded by her magical light, accepted the invitation. Then, looking at her radiant smile, Lucian realized that he would not mind even if Rachel took everything from him. He was ready to do anything to ensure that the heroine stayed with him. It had been 2 years since Rachel became a member of the Leon family, and she had gotten used to life in the duchy. During this time, a lot happened. Suddenly, Lucian entered the room, having grown noticeably over these 2 years, and beginning to look more elegant and masculine. He was so beautiful that Rachel covered her eyes with her hands so as not to be blinded by his beauty. But suddenly, the heroine was shocked when her pet suddenly touched her cheek and asked worriedly what had happened to her. Lucian was delighted and a little embarrassed when Rachel said with admiration that his radiance had blinded her. It was a very important day, Lucian's first day at the salon. Also, this day was very important for the heroine. The salon is a place for social gatherings for the children of the aristocracy. This is also the place where Lucian first met Noah. Rachel was looking forward to this and told her brother to make a lot of friends. She also asked him to invite them to the estate and introduce them to her. He looked tenderly at Rachel and smiled. Now there was no soulless expression on his face, like a doll, but a beautiful smile, full of tenderness. No matter how many times she looked at him, Rachel could not stop admiring his beauty. Lucian's face no longer had the cold indifference of a mad tyrant, but instead the warm smile of a caring guy. The heroine was incredibly happy that Lucian was no longer the mad tyrant he was in the original. Seeing that Lucian was in her room for too long, Rachel told him that he might be late and took his hand to lead him to the carriage. Even though Lucian had changed a lot over the past 2 years, Rachel was still worried that by meeting Noah and falling in love with him, Lucian might turn into a love-obsessed tyrant, like in the original story. Rachel walked her brother to the carriage to say goodbye and wish him luck. However, standing next to Rachel, Lucian did not want to let go of her hand and leave. Lucian smiled at Rachel and said he'd be back soon, and Rachel waved to him as he got into the carriage. The black horses of the Duke's estate ran furiously away from the mansion. Watching the back of the carriage quickly disappear, the heroine soon returned to the mansion. After Lucian left, Amber told Rachel that she had already prepared everything. The maid then invited the young lady to come into the kitchen. Rachel went out in a good mood to get ready to meet her friends. Accompanied by Amber, the heroine went to the Duke's kitchen. When she first baked cookies, she couldn't even really make the dough. But all these 2 years she trained hard. After learning that the Duchess had a reaction to the cookies she and Lucian made, Rachel began to try harder. Although since then, there has been no response, and the heroine has never even seen her. But thanks to this, her cookie-making skills have improved significantly. Soon after this, Rachel's friends arrived and sat down at a round table, where there was already tea and fragrant cookies. Felisa looked at the cute cookies on the table and complimented Rachel on her cooking skills. 2 other girls also joined her words. They noted that it was even a pity to have such beauty. Rachel was pleased to hear compliments from her new friends and thanked them with a smile. Rachel met Felisa 2 years ago at the Imperial Ball, and she became close to Amy and Serena through Felisa. They were her only friends who were open to communication in a cold aristocratic society. Rachel was always incredibly proud when girls talked admiringly about her brother's achievements, because she believed that he was the best. In addition, she needed to make strong connections for the future when she left the ducal family. She hoped that in the future, she could rely on her close friends. After tea, Rachel said goodbye to her friends, wishing them a good day. After the carriages departed, Amber informed the heroine that it was time to return, but she replied that she would wait a little longer, since time was flying towards evening, and Lucian would soon return. Seeing how tenderly Rachel spoke about him, Amber realized how much she liked him. She thought Rachel and Lucian would make a great couple. Rachel wanted to object, but the maid's next words, that she was worried about the heroine's marriage at such a young age, stunned her. Rachel was shocked to realize that Amber had believed her to be Lucian's fiancé all along. Seeing the shocked expression on the girl's face, Amber was also surprised, since her arguments seemed quite logical. After all, Rachel had relatives, and the Rorlando family still flourished. In addition, Amber heard that at a young age, people adopt only for the purpose of marriage. Rachel was shocked by this information. She didn't even think about marrying Lucian. Rachel was sure that Lucian should be happy with Noah, so she told the maid that this was impossible. Rachel considered the idea of marriage with Lucian absurd, so she was always ready to leave the ducal house. In addition, she was sure that the hero also believed that this was impossible. While they were talking, the carriage in which Lucian was returning finally arrived. Rachel ran up to him and greeted him with a beaming smile on her face. Just as he began to approach her, she saw another silhouette behind him. Rachel was surprised when a blonde man followed Lucian out of the carriage. His narrowed sky-blue eyes settled on Rachel, and he smiled, greeted her, and introduced himself as Noah DeCastia. Rachel was speechless in surprise, because she didn't expect it to happen so quickly. While the heroine looked at him with wide eyes and a shocked expression, Lucian reprimanded him for addressing the lady disrespectfully. Noah immediately apologized to her for his mistake and explained that in their salon, it is customary to communicate without taking into account titles and titles, so he accidentally forgot about the formalities. This was not written about in the novel, so the heroine was happy to learn something new about her pet. After greeting him, he looked at Rachel and asked her to be friends with an innocent smile. He was just as irresistible as Lucian, and Rachel accepted his offer without hesitation. Like a true fan, she immediately began asking about her relationship with Lucian. Noah said that he and Lucian became friends at the salon. Rachel was delighted to learn that she and Lucian had become friends on the first day they met. While the heroine admired the picture in front of her, Noah looked at her with a smile that seemed so sincere. Suddenly, Rachel said that her brother's friend was like a brother to her. She really wanted to make friends with the second main character of the story, so she suggested skipping the formalities. She also asked him for permission to address him as Brother Noah. He was surprised, but agreed, continuing to smile as sweetly. Lucian didn't say a word while Rachel talked to Noah. Noah explained that he had come to see her because Lucian had talked a lot about her and apologized for the unexpected visit. He looked flawless. His eyebrows were furrowed as if he was facing some kind of problem, and the heroine immediately calmed him down, saying that everything was fine. Suddenly, Lucian shielded Rachel from Noah. Then he asked his new friend in a cold tone, suggesting that they meet another time. After which, he said that it was time for him to return, which shocked Noah. Noah wanted to object, but Lucian said it was too late and quickly pushed him into the carriage. Rachel was also against it and wanted to talk more with Noah, but Lucian did not react to her request. Lucian picked up the heroine and headed into the mansion, ignoring all her protests. Rachel was surprised and did not understand what was happening and why Lucian was acting this way. With her arms around his neck, Rachel looked back at Noah. He simply smiled at her and waved. Rachel couldn't believe Noah's first appearance would end this way. The heroine continued to call her brother, trying to get at least some explanation. But he, without answering, rose with her in his arms straight to his room. Rachel called him again, and he immediately looked at her with his big golden eyes. Seeing his sweet look, the heroine was enchanted and forgot about her anger. Before Rachel knew it, she was swayed by his beauty again. And although she did not understand the reason for his offense, Rachel was sure that Lucian would not behave this way without a serious reason. Rachel and Lucian sat on the couch, and Amber brought them snacks while dinner was being prepared. After the maid left, Rachel asked Lucian how his time in the salon was. Her throat was dry in anticipation of his answer, but he only replied that it was not bad. Rachel glared at him after such a meaningless answer. She thought that once Lucian met his true love, he would want to spend more time with him. Still, she advised him to visit the salon a few more times to make many friends. Suddenly, Rachel realized that her brother had come with Noah because she said to bring a friend. Lucian didn't even deny anything. He lowered his eyes in embarrassment and nodded slightly. Rachel was disappointed to learn that Lucian didn't bring Noah because he liked him. The heroine's eyes lit up with determination. She was ready to risk anything to achieve a happy ending for her pet. Noah DeCastia turned out to be not as kind and sympathetic as Rachel imagined. He believed that Rachel would become an extremely useful doll for him. Rachel did not expect that Lucian would be so indifferent to his potential lover. And so that the tragedy from the original plot would not repeat itself, she scolded her brother and explained that it was cruel of him to treat Noah's brother in such a way. She strongly requested that he apologize to Noah the next time they met. She also asked that he be invited to the estate formally so that she could greet him properly. After listening to her, Lucian assumed that the heroine liked Noah. Having received a positive answer, he asked what exactly she liked about him. Rachel didn't know how to answer correctly because she liked everything. Lucian was her main favorite, and Noah was in second place. Without going into details, she replied that he had a very beautiful smile. Hearing this, Lucian became gloomy and lowered his head, as if realizing that he could not change anything. Noticing that her pet was jealous, Rachel was happy because before he had not shown any emotions. She smiled at Lucian and added that despite this, her brother still had the most beautiful smile. She also noted that most of all, she likes to look at his smile. Joy appeared on his face when she said this, and he replied that he liked her smile the most. Rachel was pleased to see that he had learned to speak his mind. Their conversation was interrupted by the maid, who announced that dinner was served and invited them to the table. At dinner, the Duke asked Rachel how her meeting with her friends went. Rachel said with a smile that it was fun, and everyone congratulated Lucian on winning the fencing competition. Hearing this, Lucian smiled and asked them to convey his gratitude to them. Looking at him, the Duke asked in a cold tone whether he had done anything inappropriate at the meeting in the salon. Lucian was surprised that his father spoke to him at dinner, and politely replied that he had not. 2 years have passed, but relations between them remained strained. And yet, the fact that they were used to eating at the same table could be considered significant progress. Rachel thought it would be great if the Duchess were with them too, but she was still sick. Suddenly, the Duke asked Rachel when she would start calling him Daddy. 2 pairs of eyes looked at her, but she could not say a word, her lips twitching. Seeing her confusion, the Duke said with a gloomy smile that everything was in order and he was ready to wait as long as necessary. Rachel was weak against his face. It wasn't that she didn't like the Duke. In fact, there was another reason why she didn't want to call him her father. She was just scared, because everyone she called Mom and Dad had left her. She was afraid that this might happen again. Returning to her room, Rachel decided to think about what was happening again. Lucian brought Noah to the estate earlier than in the original. He also showed abilities for magic, which were not mentioned in the novel. Rachel organized the contents of the original in a notebook. But if the plots start to vary so much, then these notes will not help her. A sudden knock on the door distracted her from her thoughts. She got up from her chair, smiled, and ran to her brother to ask why he came so late. As if about to say something important, he slowly parted his lips and asked if she wanted fruit. Noticing that Rachel was in her nightgown, Lucian assumed that she was getting ready to sleep. He was about to leave, but Rachel stopped him, saying that she wasn't planning on going to bed yet. Hearing this, Lucian decided to stop by for a while. Looking at this basket, Rachel remembered how she used to carry it to Lucian herself. Setting the basket he had brought down on the table, Rachel took the grape and brought it to his lips. She did this so often that it became natural. As soon as the heroine quietly tapped the grapes between his closed lips, the stiffness on his face began to melt, as if by a signal that only they understood. Lucian quietly looked up from under his eyelashes and opened his mouth slightly. He looked cute as he started chewing quickly, trying to hide his embarrassment. Then there was the sound of rain hitting the window. It's raining heavily outside the window, and the drops are knocking on the glass, creating a melody of sadness and loneliness. Listening to the sound, Rachel turned around and looked at Lucian. She came closer and asked in a whisper if he wanted to listen to the scary story. Since he remained silent, she continued and said that on rainy days the ghost road opens. If you take this road, ghosts will appear, exactly like you. And according to legend, the ghost will experience feelings opposite to yours, and only by making the ghost speak will it be possible to distinguish him. Lowering her muttering voice and moving her face even closer, she added that the ghost would say the opposite. However, her plan to end the story by imitating the ghosts failed miserably, as when she finished her story, thunder and lightning sounded loudly behind her. after which lightning flashed and thunder roared. It seemed to her that the window was about to break. Out of fear and surprise, she covered her ears and jumped onto the bed. At this moment, Rachel remembered her past life again. Fear gripped her body. Memories of her past life filled her mind, as if she were there again and experiencing it all. The day her adoptive parents hid her for the first time, she sat alone in a cold closet behind a locked door. That day, thunder rumbled and lightning flashed outside the window, just like now. The heroine was afraid of this, and even now, being in Rachel's body, she could not get rid of old fears, but only trembled with horror. Seeing this, Lucian gently hugged her and stroked her head with his hand, moving his palm lower. He hugged her with his other hand and stroked her back soothingly. Lucian held Rachel tightly to his chest, trying to cover her ears so she wouldn't hear the thunder. Feeling the warmth of his embrace, Rachel couldn't help but think about how nice it would have been if someone else had been with her that day. Lucian noticed that for some reason the connection with the magical light was broken. The heroine laid her head on his shoulder and waited until the thunder died down, but eventually fell asleep without realizing it. He held his sister in his arms and simply sat still until the thunder had completely died down, and only then laid her down on the bed. Then he carefully covered her with a blanket, trying not to disturb her sleep. Moonlight filled the room, illuminating the hero's face, who smiled tenderly as he looked at his peacefully sleeping sister. He only smiled in front of Rachel and didn't feel any emotion. But after today, he had a new emotion that he felt when he saw Noah: dissatisfaction. Now he regretted not stopping him when he wanted to meet Rachel. When he thought about the heroine chatting affectionately with Noah, he had an unpleasant feeling, the same as when she interacted with the beast people. He gently ran his hand through her emerald hair and hesitantly said that Rachel loved him more than anyone, as if he was trying to convince himself of this. Waking up in the morning, Rachel instantly remembered the events of the previous night. She screamed in shame and kicked the blanket with all her might. If it weren't for the thunder, she would have finished the story and perhaps would have seen the frightened expression on her pet's face. But because of the thunder, everything went wrong, and she was the one who was scared. Her face burned with the thought that the thunder had caused her to fall asleep, screaming and squealing in his arms. However, she always found it difficult to sleep when the lightning flickered. But yesterday, thanks to Lucian, she was able to sleep soundly. While the heroine was thinking in confusion, Amber came in and, seeing that she was already awake, offered to help her get ready. The maid carefully braided her hair into a beautiful hairstyle, using soft and smooth combs. Having finished her work, the maid took a step back so that the young lady could look at her reflection and appreciate the new image. Looking at the ruby hairpin, Rachel remembered Lump and Damien and yearned for them again. Suddenly, a servant outside announced the Duke's arrival. The Duke then entered the room with a big smile and asked Rachel how she slept. He reported that there had been a thunderstorm at night, so he was worried about her. Rachel greeted him with a sweet smile and replied that she slept well. As he got closer, the Duke asked if she would like to go somewhere together next week. Thinking it was a great idea, Rachel happily agreed. Then the Duke asked if there was anything she would like to buy. The Duke was very surprised when, after a short thought, she asked about the place where they sell sauces. Rachel then added with delight that even a restaurant with spicy food would do. The heroine really missed spicy food. Although the Duke did not share her tastes, he promised to find such a place. While the Duke and Rachel were happily discussing their plans, two servants stood not far from them. One of them listened carefully to every word they said and memorized it. That same night, Noah received a message from intelligence at the Duke's mansion. The servant reported this to Rachel's uncle, who was delighted, thinking that he could finally get his niece back. Noah gave a note of information to Count Orlando, who shared his plan with him. To accomplish this task, Count Orlando hired a dark magician, although it was expensive. A week later, as agreed, Rachel and the Duke went for a walk. But this time, they did not go to the street dedicated to the nobility, since there were no sauce or spicy food stores there. The Duke was not very happy with the choice of place for the walk, but Rachel was happy to explore new territories and studied the surroundings with curiosity. However, due to the large number of knights who accompanied them, Rachel thought that they would not be comfortable entering the store. At the request of his daughter, the Duke reduced the number of escort knights to 4. The Duke also took the sword to protect Rachel in case of danger. One of the knights informed the Duke that a sauce shop was nearby. As Rachel and the Duke passed by the merchants, Rachel noticed a woman selling writing materials. Noticing something, Rachel asked to stop and walked closer to examine the object. Rachel noticed the letter opener, the color of which resembled the combination of her and Lucian's hair. The Duke noticed that Rachel liked the knife and immediately decided to buy it for her. However, Rachel asked to buy not one, but 2 knives. The Duke thought that 1 knife would be a spare and happily agreed. Rachel thanked the Duke and put it in her bag to give it to Lucian when she returned to the mansion. After that, they headed to the sauce store, where the salesman politely greeted them and told them about the selection. Rachel immediately asked to see the hot sauce. The Duke, in turn, ordered to bring all the hot sauces that were available. The merchant immediately carried out his order and brought everything he had. Rachel noticed a skull on one of the bottles and asked the seller what it meant. The merchant replied that this was the hottest sauce and she should not eat it, as it was dangerous to her health. Hearing this, her eyes lit up, and she decided that she must definitely buy this sauce. The Duke tried to stop Rachel because he was afraid the sauce would be too spicy, but Rachel insisted on her own, because she couldn't wait to get home soon and show the sauce to Lucian. In the end, the Duke bought everything and ordered the merchant to send the purchases to the residence of Duke Leon, but Rachel immediately put the bottle with the skull in her bag. After leaving the store, the Duke invited Rachel to go get something to eat. While they were walking and chatting merrily, someone was secretly watching them, waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, he threw a smoke cone directly at them, and the fog instantly enveloped them. Rachel was very scared, not understanding what was happening. Suddenly, the worried Duke grabbed her by the shoulders and ordered her not to leave him. But suddenly, purple smoke enveloped the Duke and pulled him away from her. After which, with the help of purple smoke, an unknown man brought Rachel closer to him. At the same time, he covered her mouth with all his might with a damp handkerchief. A foul odor filled her nose, and her mind quickly became foggy. The man, having successfully completed his task, took the sleeping Rachel into his arms. Lucian, sitting quietly in his office, could not think what was happening to his beloved sister. He carefully rewrote another historical work, often thinking about Rachel. Lucian knew that she often went for walks with his father. Before, he couldn't stand her because he was jealous, because he also wanted to go somewhere with his father. But now he was jealous of his father, because he also wanted to go out with Rachel. He thought it would be fun to eat delicious food and see interesting things with his little sister. Next to her, he saw only good things, and they often gave each other gifts. Thinking about her, Lucian wanted to give her some gift, but he didn't know what it was. As he thought about it, he remembered Noah's words about how little girls love cute things. He also remembered Rachel's words that what she liked best was her older brother's smile. The memory of this made his cheeks turn red and a smile appear on his lips. While concentrating on writing, he noticed a noise coming from outside the mansion. A series of unusual cries of knights and horse trampling were heard. He had never seen such a commotion in the duchy before and felt something strange. For some reason, the knights were grouping together, although it was not yet time to hunt monsters. Analyzing the situation, he felt very anxious, realizing that most likely something had happened during the walk. The situation must have been dire, as the Duke's knights were in a hurry to get somewhere. Even the staff of the mansion gathered at the entrance and discussed the attack on the Duke. Lucian ran outside, and in a panic called the butler, who was standing next to other workers of the duchy. The servants were shocked to see him in this state, as he had always been quiet and reserved. Lucian quickly climbed onto his horse, and without hesitation, he began to gallop. The butler ran out in front of Lucian, who was already planning to leave the palace. He stopped his horse a couple of centimeters from the butler. Then he looked coldly at the elderly man and said that if he wanted to die, then let him do it somewhere else. His words took the butler by surprise, but he soon came to his senses and in a low voice asked Lucian to dismount from his horse, adding that the Duke would return safe and sound, and if he left like that, he would become a burden to the Duke. Sitting on a black horse, Lucian lowered his golden eyes, which seemed as if they were made of cold metal, and asked in a stern tone how he dared to command him. His cold tone made the butler tremble involuntarily, but Lucian did not have time to deal with him. Lucian was alarmed, but did not show it. Instead, he firmly ordered the butler to leave, and he obediently stepped aside. Lucian quickly galloped away, and the butler remained in a stupor, watching the retreating silhouette of the young master. The butler was amazed, because he had never seen Lucian like this before. The roar of the enraged Duke like the growl of a wild beast, was heard in the alley. He chastised the knights for the complete lack of discipline in the order. The Duke was furious that they had missed the man who kidnapped Rachel. Hearing his father's words, Lucian called him to make his presence known. Seeing him, the Duke asked in surprise why he was there, and most importantly, he scolded him for going out unaccompanied, being the Duke's successor, after which he ordered the knights to escort Lucian to the palace. Having received the order, the knights headed towards the young master, but Lucian used his magical powers to stop them. Everyone present, including the Duke, was amazed at his strength. He had never contradicted a single word his father said, but now everything had changed, and for the first time in his life, he refused to carry out his order. The Duke needed to send Lucian back, since the heir should be safe in emergency situations. But before he could say anything, he galloped away. The knights who were closer to him followed him, but Lucian was faster. In his head, Lucian was already grouping the information he had heard, and in his head, he called Encho-sensei. This was the first time the hero had addressed him, so he grumpily asked what happened. At some point, Encho's voice sounded in his head, and Lucian did not remember when this first happened. But this crafty magician usually did not listen to anyone, so the hero did not allow him to speak. Ignoring Encho-sensei's grumbling, Lucian asked him to find Rachel with a trembling voice. He literally begged his sensei to find his little sister. Seeing the despair in Lucian's eyes, Encho thought that he had a chance to absorb the young man's body and take revenge. Rachel woke up with a severe headache and couldn't figure out what voice was in her head. Blinking a few times, she opened her eyes with difficulty, and her blurry vision gradually cleared. She looked around in fear, trying to figure out where she was. It turned out that she was in the middle of a dense forest, where even the night sky was not visible. Rachel remembered being kidnapped, but much to her surprise, her arms and legs were free. Not far from her, she heard the voices of some people who were drinking and discussing that the Duke of Leon had hired an expensive spirit. Among them was her uncle, who said in high spirits that despite her childish appearance, they would still be able to take advantage of Lady Leon's status. The kidnappers were so drunk that they didn't even notice that Rachel was already awake. Seeing her uncle among the criminals, Rachel was not surprised, because she knew that he was against her adoption from the very beginning. Rachel didn't know exactly what their goals were, but she was sure that nothing good should be expected from them. They took the situation so calmly that they didn't even tie Rachel up, and the heroine decided to slowly leave those people, so I slowly crawled away. Making sure the men weren't looking in her direction, Rachel prepared to get up and run away. While she was dragging her feet, thinking about everything that was happening, she heard footsteps and held her breath in fear. When the man came closer and asked where she was going, Rachel backed away in fear and fell to the ground. The heroine was speechless from horror and looked at him with eyes round in horror and her mouth open. He approached her, and not hearing an answer, squatted down to look into her eyes and asked if she was trying to escape. The webtoon featured many different supporting characters who fell in love with Noah. Among them was one incomparable hero who could easily compete with Oscar for the place of the second main character. However, this man wasn't obsessed with Noah, he was just psychotic. It was the dark spirit summoner Elliot Aiden, who was standing in front of Rachel right now. Seeing the color of his hair and spirit, the heroine immediately realized that it was Elliot. Squeezing her hand tighter, he irritably asked why she was ignoring him and repeated his question again. Rachel didn't try to ignore him. She was just in shock because she didn't know he was involved in her kidnapping. When she finally spoke, Elliot grinned and demanded that she answer his question. While the heroine was busy trying to answer something in her own defense, he warned that if she wandered around, she would cause him problems. Seeing that the heroine was looking away, he grabbed her chin and forced her to look into his eyes, telling her to look at him while talking. Looking at his face, she realized that it was not for nothing that they called him a beautiful madman, because everything about him was truly beautiful, from his face to his voice. But she quickly changed her mind when he said she looked like a potato. Unable to bear this insult, she replied as politely as she could that he looked like a snake. Rachel seemed very brave and funny to him, and he began to laugh at the top of his lungs. Not understanding what he found funny in her words, Rachel noticed that he was also very brave, since everyone knows that the Duke is a very scary person. Hearing her words, Elliot reminded her that she was not Duke Leon's natural daughter, so it was unlikely that he would come to save her. Hearing his words, Rachel shuddered. At that moment, she realized that she could only rely on herself. Without showing a shadow of doubt, she pulled away from him and replied that she also knew a lot about him and his origins. His dark purple eyes, like blooming violets, looked at her with bewilderment. The heroine read the original thoroughly and naturally knew about the secret of its birth. Elliot was a commoner who didn't know his origins, and what he wanted most was to know who his father was. Having heard that this secret was connected with the honor of the imperial family, he was skeptical about it, considering it nonsense. However, curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to listen to this nonsense to the end. Then the heroine, lowering her voice, said that since he was a commoner and had never seen the emperor, he did not know that His Majesty had the same shiny purple hair as him. At her words, he stopped breathing and leaned closer to her to hear her story. But instead of finishing her speech, Rachel squirted black sauce right on his face. It was not difficult for Encho-sensei to fulfill Lucian's request to find Rachel, and with her unique energy waves, it was even easier. However, he revealed that to use search magic, he needed a physical body, and he was in a state of soul. Then the hero, without hesitation, invited him to occupy his body. Encho immediately agreed, because this is what he had been striving for all this time. While Lucian was talking to Encho, the knights were finally able to find him. But at that moment, it was no longer Lucian who was in front of them, but his ancestor Enko, who had taken over his body. Despite the fact that the hero ignored all their words, the knights continued to persuade him to return to the estate. Suddenly, Enko turned to them, and looking at them with his black eyes, released a huge magical power with a grin. Its magical waves were dark in color, and, under the influence of black magic, gave off an ominous feeling. Encho was pleased with his descendant, since he turned out to be a good vessel for his soul. However, this was not enough to contain all his magical power, and yet Lucian was so capable that he could even suppress him, a great magician. Therefore, he decided to wait until the vessel grew further. In the meantime, Encho was forced to fulfill the requests of his arrogant descendant. At that moment, closing his eyes in pain, Elliot wandered through the forest in search of Rachel, screaming loudly and cursing her. The heroine hid nearby behind a tree and covered her nose and mouth with her hands, trembling with fear so as not to breathe or make a sound. However, it was not a branch that she accidentally stepped on. Hearing the sound, Elliot instantly identified its source and angrily directed his energy in that direction. Rachel ran away in horror. Shadow spirits created by Elliot haunted Rachel. The heroine had difficulty dodging them. She ran as fast as she could, but still, she clearly heard the voice of a madman. Running away from the voice, she became disorientated and fell. Suddenly, someone came up to her and asked if she was okay. Hearing a voice right in front of her, Rachel screamed in horror for him to go away. She was afraid to even look at him, but when he heard the question of who she was running from, she realized that it was not Elliot and looked up. The stranger, without waiting for an answer, took Rachel in his arms and offered help with a smile. Having uttered these words, he quickly ran with her, and only then, seeing his face, did the heroine realize that it was Oscar, that is, Lump. Hearing his name from Rachel's lips, the fox was delighted. He was incredibly happy to meet the hostess, and that she was able to recognize him. When they reached a safe place, Lump lowered Rachel to the ground, and then she asked him how he had lived all this time. Since they met in the forest, the heroine assumed that he had lived here all the time. However, the fox said that this was not so, and he lived with the falcon. She was surprised to learn that she and Demian lived together. Taking the opportunity, Lumpy complained that only the falcon had a cool name, and demanded that Rachel change his name. He also explained that he did not bring the boar with him on purpose. The Lump told how everything really happened, and was offended that, despite the fact that he did it unintentionally, the mistress left him. Rachel looked at him with complete bewilderment, because Lump had never been so emotional before. The fox began to cry from the memories, telling what happened at that time. When Rachel saw Lumpy crying, she felt sad, but not knowing how to console him, she could only apologize. At that moment, the fox, covered in tears, demanded that the mistress take responsibility. The heroine did not know how to react, and agreed, but only if the Duke did not mind. The place where they were hiding looked like a cave, and suddenly someone's footsteps were heard outside. Rachel tensed, thinking it was Elliot, but a handsome man with dark brown hair and light brown eyes entered the cave and greeted his owner politely. Hearing him call her mistress, Rachel guessed that it was Damien. He came and sat down next to Lump, after which he told how much they trained so that they could see her again in the future. The heroine could not even imagine that she would meet the beast people again like this. She shed tears at the count. She was pleased to see them after so much time. But the sweet reunion moment was ruined by Rachel's loud stomach growling. In this awkward situation, she covered her stomach with her hands, trying to suppress the rumbling in her stomach. Realizing that Rachel was hungry, Damien immediately took the form of a falcon and flew to get food for his mistress. The fox also wanted to court the heroine, so he ran out after him, saying that he would get it first. Rachel laughed as she watched them. Thanks to them, she was able to relax a little and stop worrying. Having determined Rachel's location, Encho immediately rushed into the forest. Once in the forest, he left Lucian's body, reporting that they had already arrived. Opening his eyes, the hero found that he was standing in front of the cave, where, according to Encho-sensei, Rachel was located. He felt the energy of his sister in the cave that was right in front of him, and, jumping off his horse, he ran towards her. Approaching the entrance, he began to loudly call for Rachel in the hope that she was okay. As soon as the excitement and fear subsided, fatigue took its toll, and Rachel fell asleep. Seeing her with her eyes closed, Lucian decided that something had happened to her and hurried towards her. He desperately called her, trying to wake her up. But the girl did not respond, so he hugged her and shook her slightly to wake her up. It was only when she opened her eyes slightly and said that she was fine, for the first time in a very long time, that Lucian could finally breathe calmly. Hearing that Rachel was not injured, he hugged her tightly as if he did not want to let her go anywhere ever again. Feeling the warmth of her brother, a feeling of relief washed over her, and she burst into tears. Lucian gently and carefully hugged her with one arm and stroked her back soothingly with the other. When he noticed they were being watched, his golden eyes flashed and he prepared to protect Rachel. Damien and Lump came to the cave, bringing fruit for their mistress. Rachel smiled and told Lucian that it was the falcon and the fox, and that they were the ones who saved her. She also said that they had lived here all this time. Unlike Rachel, Lucian didn't look happy that they were seeing each other again. The Lump happily ran up to Rachel and boasted that he had brought a lot of apples for her. The falcon suggested starting with the small fruits that he brought, so as not to upset the stomach. They both offered their fruits to Rachel at the same time, as if competing to see whose fruit she would eat first. So as not to offend anyone, Rachel took a piece of fruit from everyone and thanked them with a smile for their concern. Lucian pursed his lips at the happy atmosphere between them. He remembered the beast people very well, which is why he did not like their reunion with Rachel. Suddenly, Rachel asked Lucian if the Duke was okay. Hearing that he was not seriously injured, the heroine finally breathed a sigh of relief. While Rachel was enjoying the fruit, Lucian suggested that she return to the estate as soon as she had eaten. The heroine immediately agreed, but suddenly she became interested in how Lucian found her. Her question took the hero by surprise, because he did not have time to come up with an answer. Stuttering, Lucian began to think hard about possible responses. In the end, he said that since everyone was combing urban areas, he decided to look in the forest. The heroine admired and was so proud of her pet that she believed his every word. However, Lucian was not very happy about his sister's praise, as the voice in his head kept reminding him that all this was the merit of Encho-sensei. After the heroine ate her fruit, they all went to the Duke's estate. As the sun set, Rachel became worried that they might get lost, but Lump reassured her, saying that there was no need to worry. He said that he and the falcon could see perfectly in the dark. Rachel was relieved to hear this and decided to trust them. While the falcon and fox were deciding which of them would show the way, Lucian helped Rachel climb onto her horse. In the end, they decided that Lump would show the way, and Damien would inspect the territory from the sky. Damien turned into a falcon and flew up, and Lump turned into a fox and went forward. Rachel and Lucian, riding a black horse, rode after the fox. Suddenly, the heroine remembered Elliot, and a shiver ran down her spine. He was a well-known figure in circles where lawlessness reigned. Even in the original, he did not hesitate to kidnap and threaten, and always spoke in the language of violence and coercion. And Rachel splashed hot sauce in the man's face. Feeling her trembling, Lucian decided that she was cold and held her tightly to him to warm her up. And yet, at least for this moment, she was truly happy. As soon as they left the forest, The fox turned back into a human and informed Rachel about it. Then Lucian thanked them as politely as possible for their help and, trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible, said that they could already return home. Hearing this, the beastmen were indignant because they no longer wanted to part with their mistress. Rachel also expressed a desire to take them with him and asked his brother for permission. Not knowing what Lucian was thinking, she whispered with a guilty tone that they still considered her their mistress, so she decided to take responsibility for them. Lucian hesitated for a moment at her question and replied that his father would most likely be against it. Rachel looked at her brother with pleading eyes and said that they saved her life, so she will try to persuade the Duke. Lucian winced when he heard her words, but still gave his permission. At this time, the Duke was beside himself with concern for Rachel and was ready, even while wounded, to go looking for her again. The butler tried to stop him, reminding him that he should remain quiet until the wound healed, but he would not be able to sleep or rest properly until Rachel returned home safely. When Rachel and Lucian reached the main gate of the ducal estate, the knight guarding the gate hurried to inform the Duke about this. The Duke was shocked to hear that Lucian had returned with Rachel. Seeing the young lady and the young master, the knights immediately opened the gate. Unable to wait any longer for them to reach the mansion, the Duke rushed to meet them. Turning towards his voice, they saw the Duke himself and the butler, who were excitedly galloping towards them on horses. Having reached them, the Duke jumped off his horse and rushed to Rachel. Holding out his hands to her, he held his daughter close to him with trembling hands, apologizing for his incompetence as a father and glad that she was okay. Seeing his bloodshot eyes made her heart flutter, and after everything that had happened, Rachel finally felt relieved that the Duke, Lucian, and she were safe, so she smiled and said that she was fine. The sweet moment of reunion was disrupted by a loud noise, made by the fox, that the two had sandwiched between them as they hugged. The Duke didn't even notice Lump, because he was looking only at Rachel. The falcon also flew up to the heroine, and she told the Duke that these were the same animals that he had given her. She also hastened to add that they were the ones who saved her. After her words, the two took their human forms and greeted the Duke. Taking advantage of the Duke's fortune, Rachel decided that it would be easier to get permission before they entered the house and announced that they wanted to stay with her. The Duke, quickly realizing what she was driving at, replied in the tone of a negotiator that he would agree only on the condition that she named him Dad. Rachel was dumbfounded by the Duke's request. Coming closer, he looked at her with a gentle smile and repeated that if her daughter calls him Daddy, he will fulfill any of her wishes. Hearing his soft and caring voice, Rachel let her eyes go as she was still afraid, but she still decided to trust the Duke, and closing her eyes, nodded slightly. Having gathered her thoughts, she raised her eyes and, looking at her dad, smiled charmingly and repeated her request to leave the beastmen. Hearing her call him Daddy, the Duke broke into a smile and took her in his arms, after which he ordered the butler to prepare a good room and food for the beastmen. Having heard about the food, the fox was not at a loss and immediately said that he would like to eat melon candies and chicken. The Duke carefully put Rachel on a horse to accompany her to the mansion. When the Duke talked to the heroine, he relaxed and smiled, but when he turned to Lucian, his good mood disappeared. He told the hero in a stern tone that he would talk to him tomorrow. Lucian did not answer his father, but only bowed slightly and showed that he had heard him. After a long and unsuccessful search, Rachel Elliott tiredly sat down on the grass near the tree. His eyes were still burning from the sauce that the heroine splashed in his face, and he was determined to take revenge on this scoundrel. Having escorted his daughter to the room, the Duke continued to worry and ask about her well-being. Rachel assured him that she was fine and asked him to go rest too. The Duke smiled tenderly at her, wished her good night, and left. As soon as he left Rachel's room, his expression changed dramatically. Lucian appeared to his father in a new light. He could not even imagine that the boy had a talent for magic. From generation to generation, the Leon family produced many talented swordsmen, but there were none who mastered magic. Except for one person, the strongest magician in the entire history of the Leonis Empire, a rebel who planned to destroy it, Encho de Leon. These thoughts made him feel anxious. Rachel went to bed in a good mood. Noticing that Milady was still awake, Amber brought her milk and honey. The maid explained that this would warm her from the inside, and her soul would become calmer after the stress she had experienced. The maid was also very worried about her mistress when she found out that she had been kidnapped. The heroine took the glass, and with a smile thanked the maid for her care. Then she asked where Demian and Lump were. Amber replied that the servants were looking after them and asked if they should be brought. But Rachel refused, saying that they would be well taken care of. After drinking the milk, Rachel went to bed. Lying in bed, Rachel analyzed the events of the past day. Ultimately, she named the Duke Daddy. This was nothing new to her. After all, she was adopted even before she was reborn. Life in the orphanage wasn't that bad, but she was very happy when her adoption was approved, even though this happiness only lasted for a moment. Trembling with excitement, the heroine tried to drive away negative thoughts and repeated to herself that this time everything would be different. It seemed to her that she had almost plunged into the kingdom of Morphia when she suddenly heard a familiar knock on her door. She immediately jumped out of her seat because it was a secret knock that she and Lucian had come up with. Outside the door stood an excited Lucian, who had come to check how his sister was feeling. Seeing her in her nightgown, he decided that he had woken her and apologized. Lucian turned to leave and not disturb his sister's rest, but Rachel quickly grabbed his hand and asked him to stay with her. Without waiting for an answer, Rachel pulled Lucian by the arm and told him to come inside. Lucian smiled slightly and, looking meekly down at her, accepted her invitation. Rachel was about to turn on the magic lamp, but Lucian stopped her, saying that it was not necessary. He said he would leave immediately after he put her to bed. Then Rachel decided that she would not sleep at all. However, the hero did not like this answer, and he picked her up and laid her on the bed. Then he carefully covered her with a blanket so that she would not freeze, after which he just looked at her silently for a while. His face shone so much that the heroine could not sleep. Rachel turned to him and thanked him warmly, saying that she was very glad when he came to her. Lucian's eyes widened, then curved into crescent moons, and he smiled softly. At this moment, the heroine was once again convinced that her favorite was the cutest. She was worried that later, when the hero became closer to Noah, these moments might disappear. Still, Rachel enjoyed the atmosphere while she could. Her thoughts were interrupted by Lucian, who gently stroked her head and asked her to fall asleep. Rachel yawned and replied that she didn't want to sleep yet. Despite this, her eyes slowly closed, and soon she was fast asleep. Lucian, who had been stroking her hair all this time, noticing that she was already asleep, tenderly kissed her forehead and wished her sweet dreams. Blushing with embarrassment, he headed towards the doors. Leaving the room, he quietly closed the door, trying not to make any noise so as not to accidentally wake Rachel. He wanted to return to his room, but before he could take a step, the Duke called him. The father looked angrily at his son as he left Rachel's room. Lucian did not expect to meet him and was therefore very surprised. The Duke furiously approached the hero and asked what he was doing in the heroine's room at such a late hour. Lucian answered honestly that she was awake, and he put her to bed. The Duke said that he wanted to postpone the conversation until the morning, but having met him, he decided to talk now. The Duke then ordered Lucian to follow him into the study. Pedro looked at Lucian, who stood calmly in front of him, and scolded him for not fulfilling his duties as heir. If the head of the family is in danger, the heir is obliged to protect his family and home. However, Lucian left the house without permission, and this threatened him with deprivation of his place as heir. But even after his father's threats, Lucian did not flinch. The Duke noticed that his behavior was different from what it had been before. Usually his face showed almost nothing, but he always became confused when it came to the right of inheritance. But now he didn't even move, as if no matter what his father said, he wouldn't care. It wouldn't hurt him. The enraged Duke ordered his son to return to his room and think about his actions. Lucian nodded calmly and replied that in that case, he would go to his room. After that, Lucian, without feeling an ounce of regret, turned and left. The Duke only adopted Rachel to protect her and keep her safe, because after the death of Liam and his wife, Orlando's family began to take unexpected steps. Rachel was in danger in that house, but now another problem has appeared. The Duke was worried that Lucian would be a bad influence on Rachel. In her sleep, Rachel lay on Lucian's lap with her eyes closed, and he gently stroked her hair. Opening her eyes, she smiled tenderly at him. Then Lucian smiled too. Suddenly, an unknown voice angrily asked what she was and why she couldn't be controlled. Horrified, Rachel woke up from her sleep. Opening her eyes, Rachel saw a worried Amber next to her who was waiting for her to wake up. The maid said that she had a high temperature during the night. Suddenly, Rachel felt an ache all over her body. Since Rachel was having trouble moving, and it was getting close to lunch, the maid offered to bring her some cream soup. As soon as Amber opened the door to leave, the worried beastman rushed into the room. Having assumed human form, Damien and Lump ran up to Rachel, vying with each other, asking about her well-being. Rachel tried to calm them down and replied with a smile that she was just a little overtired. Since the falcon and fox were making a lot of noise, Amber reprimanded them and said that the lady needed peace, after which she escorted them out of the room. Some time passed, and the worried Duke also came to visit Rachel. With a voice trembling with anger, he cursed the kidnappers, because of whose actions his daughter fell ill, and promised that he would definitely punish them. But even in front of the Duke, the maid did not retreat. She informed him that the lady needed rest, and asked him to leave the room. After this, the heroine spent several days in bed, and Amber carefully looked after her. She was also visited by friends who learned about what had happened. Rachel told them about her abduction and how she managed to escape by throwing hot sauce in the face of one of her kidnappers. Hearing this, they were surprised and delighted by the courage of their friend. And there was one more guest whom the heroine was especially happy about, Duchess Camilla de Leon. Having learned about what had happened, the Duchess visited Rachel and inquired about her well-being. Rachel responded with surprise that she was feeling much better already. Camilla felt relieved to learn that, despite the severe fright, the girl was okay. The heroine was surprised to hear wishes for a speedy recovery from the Duchess. Rachel thanked her sincerely for her concern. However, she was a little sad because she never saw Lucien and was unable to give him her gift. Lucien was punished all this time and was imprisoned in his room. His head was filled with thoughts about his sister because he had heard rumors about her poor health, but he could not visit her. Taking this opportunity, Encho-sensei added fuel to the fire, reminding him of his lack of power. Encho manipulates Lucien's affection for Rachel, instilling in him the idea that he should become a duke. After all, if he inherits the title and becomes the head of the family, everything in this house will obey his will. But now this was impossible, so Encho offered his help. In exchange for Lucien lending him his body, Encho promised to help him see Rachel. The hero doubted whether to accept the offer. The last time Encho took over his body, he felt as if his consciousness and his very being were disappearing. At that moment, the hero was scared. Therefore, he refused, saying that for now he would obey the will of the current head of the family. However, he had no intention of living forever with his father's permission. Until this moment, all he wanted was to take the place of heir and gain his father's recognition. But now there was a person who understood him, so he no longer needed anyone's recognition. However, he understood that now he needed power so that he would no longer dance to someone else's tune. Rachel woke up and stretched sweetly. She felt that her whole body was stiff from lying for a long time. The room was flooded with sunlight streaming through the open curtains, and suddenly, Rachel heard voices outside. Under her window, Lump and Damien were happily chatting about something. Watching him from the window, Rachel was happy to see that they were doing well. Since the heroine had already recovered, she decided to go visit Lucien. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Having received permission, Amber entered the room and told Rachel that a guest had come to see her. My Lord Castia. Rachel was overjoyed when she heard that Noah had come to see her. Noah drank tea in the guest room, waiting for the heroine. After changing, Rachel happily ran to Noah, so as not to keep him waiting. Noah was surprised to see an energetic Rachel, because he thought she was sick, but the girl cheerfully reported that she already felt great. Noah smiled politely back and said he was glad to hear that. Rachel was delighted with the dazzling beauty of her second favorite. Noah asked Rachel if it was true that Lucien was under house arrest. After receiving confirmation, Noah expressed his sympathy for this. But on the other hand, he thought that perhaps this was for the best, since otherwise the hero would have driven him away again. Rachel gladly agreed to Noah's offer to talk longer this time, but she immediately regretted it, because she believed that Noah should improve his relationship with Lucien. Unexpectedly, Noah said that he is a big tea drinker. He also praised the skill of the servants who served the tea. Noah talked nonstop about the tea, and Rachel tried to follow his train of thought. Hearing him say that this tea gives a warming aroma, she was surprised, because this type of tea, on the contrary, gives an invigorating effect. Suddenly, she remembered the words from a scary story about ghosts. that a ghost expresses the opposite feelings from a person. For a moment, fear and horror took possession of her. However, she quickly pulled herself together and threw away these ridiculous thoughts. She tried to carry on a conversation with my lord, but was shocked to hear that he drinks 10 cups of tea a day. Looking at the person in front of her, the heroine realized that this Noah was giving off a completely different feeling than the original one. Suddenly, Noah looked at her with his piercing gaze and asked if she was really Rachel. Hearing these words, she was so shocked that her heart almost stopped. While the gears in her brain were constantly turning, trying to comprehend what was happening, the guy winked playfully and laughingly said that he was just joking. He explained his joke by the well-known opinion that people change dramatically once they experience a serious shock. Suddenly, Noah lowered his eyes and muttered quietly that Cassandra was not finished yet. Rachel didn't hear his words because of the guy's quiet voice and asked him to repeat, but he continued to drink tea and said that he was talking to himself. Noah then thanked her for her time and expressed his joy that she was feeling healthy. As he left, he said goodbye and asked to say hello to Lucian. Rachel walked him to the carriage and waited for him to leave. Looking after him, Rachel thought that this was her first full conversation with Noah. He was too different from the Noah she knew, so much so that anyone who knows the original would curse that the character's image is completely destroyed. It was as if another person had moved into him. Considering that she herself had inhabited Rachel's body, it didn't seem so incredible. For a moment, she thought Noah had actually moved, but the heroine immediately drove away these thoughts, believing that this could not be. Since a person is not two-dimensional, she assumed that Noah also had sides that she didn't know about. After seeing Noah off, Rachel and Amber returned back to the mansion. At this time, the Duke, as usual, was working in his office. Suddenly, he was informed that Lady Rachel wanted to meet him. Having received permission, she entered and greeted the Duke with a smile. Again, hearing the Duke's address from her lips, the man was upset. He reminded her that she should call him Daddy. Then Rachel awkwardly corrected her mistake and called him Daddy. Only then did he ask about the reasons for her visit. Hearing that she had come to find out if he had captured the kidnappers, the Duke became a little upset. He was depressed because he had not yet been able to catch them. Upon learning of this, Rachel wondered if she should tell him that her uncle was among the kidnappers. However, she was not yet completely sure of what was happening, and did not want to put Erlando's family in jeopardy in vain. Seeing that Rachel was thoughtful, the Duke decided that she was upset due to the lack of good news, and apologized. The heroine said that she had one request, and the Duke agreed to fulfill it. However, having learned that she wanted to see her brother, he refused her, justifying this by the fact that Lucian was now punished and was under arrest. The Duke explained that the reason lies in the actions of the hero, which do not correspond to the behavior of the heir. In response, Rachel reminded the Duke that her brother had come to save her, and that without his help, she would still be wandering through the forest. With a pitiful expression on her face, she said that she was very pained by the fact that her brother, who had suffered because of her, was also punished. Therefore, Rachel asked to be punished instead of Lucian. The Duke calmly replied that she was not guilty of anything, and it was Lucian who did not carry out the order, showing self-will, for which he was punished. However, he was weak at the sight of her puppy dog eyes and allowed her to meet her brother. The Duke looked intently at Rachel, who out of habit called him Duke, and the girl immediately, realizing her mistake, corrected herself. The Duke praised Rachel and patted her head affectionately. Lucian remained in his room all this time and continued to study. Hearing a knock on the door, the hero guessed that it was Rachel and jumped out of his chair in surprise. The next moment, she appeared in the room with a smile, holding a basket in her hands. She happily told him that the Duke allowed her to visit him. Since Lucian was worried that he was unable to visit her due to his punishment, she assured him that she was fine and completely healthy. After they settled down on the couch, she asked how he was doing. Rachel believed that the Duke was too cruel to his own son. She told Lucian that she had a gift for him and began looking for it in the basket. Opening the box, Rachel showed Lucian the letter opener and told him that it was the same as hers. Lucian immediately noticed that the color of the stone matched the color of Rachel's hair. The hero was very happy to receive a gift from his sister, but at the same time he was embarrassed because he could not give her an equivalent gift. But Rachel reassured him, saying that he was the one who always helped her. Then she took out a box of cookies from the basket, which she had baked herself, and offered to treat her. Rachel was sure Lucian liked pecan cookies, but he only really tasted them when he was near her. She handed him one cookie with a smile and wished him bon appetit. Rachel knew Lucian very well, so he wanted to know more about him too. Looking at her, he thought that he wanted to know everything about her. Her favorite food, clothes, and jewelry. After meeting Rachel, the Duke was worried that she was too close to Lucian. Lucian looked like the Duke's father, and Rachel looked like Liam. Duke didn't like the idea of a child who reminded him of Liam being next to his son, who looked like his father. The Duke considered Rachel's behavior difficult, but Lucian was the only one of her age in the estate, so the Duke could not forbid them to be friends. A sudden knock on the door distracted him from his thoughts. The knight said that he had a report about Rachel's kidnapping. He reported that the details have not yet been clarified. However, he had suspicions that there was a spy on the estate who was connected to the kidnapper. The Duke was stunned to learn that even in Rachel's duchy there was danger. He ordered the knight to prepare an elite squad of guards. The Duke decided to temporarily hide Rachel in another place. Hearing the Duke's words about moving, the heroine was so surprised that she dropped the spoon she was using to eat the pudding. He said that she would leave tomorrow during the day. The Duke told her that there was a sea nearby, a cool and picturesque place. But the heroine never wanted to leave her favorite, so she asked the Duke to stay. However, no matter how much this saddened him, in the current situation, the Duke saw no other way out. The Duke told her that there was a spy on the estate who was in secret agreement with the kidnapper. Rachel was stunned to learn about the spy. The Duke promised her that he would definitely find him, and Rachel would leave the estate only for this period. After these words, the heroine could no longer object, but felt relieved that this was only temporary. To cheer her up, the Duke suggested taking a short walk after dessert. During the walk, they recalled the last 2 years spent together. Rachel sincerely thanked her father for his help and support. The Duke was glad that she had already gotten used to him and called him father. Suddenly, he asked what the heroine thought about Lucian. She adored him and thought he was cute, but she couldn't say it out loud. Therefore, she replied that he was cool and took good care of her. Seeing the delight with which Rachel spoke about the hero, he realized that during this time they had become closer. Although the Duke was his father, this Lucian instilled fear in him. Looking into his deep and empty eyes, he could not understand what the hero was thinking about. The Duke was lost in thought and did not notice how he said his thoughts out loud. Rachel, looking at him, only hoped that her relationship with her son would someday improve. After walking with the Duke, Rachel went to bake cookies, but Lump, who had never seen someone bake before, asked her what she was doing. Having received the answer, the fox asked why she was doing this. Rachel wanted to give it to the person she was grateful to, the Duchess, since she had visited her during her illness. For one thing, she was going to say goodbye to her before leaving. Seeing the chocolates, Lump immediately licked his lips and asked Rachel if he could eat them. But Demian immediately took the bowl away from him and ordered him not to disturb the hostess, after which Demian dragged Lump along with him to explain everything. The Duchess had been going for walks occasionally lately, so Rachel happily assumed she was feeling a little better. Then, the heroine went to the Duchess with cookies. Usually she passed them through the maid. The maid informed her mistress of Lady Orlando's visit. Camilla, who usually sat on the sofa by the window, allowed her to enter. Rachel smiled and thanked Camilla for allowing her to visit. The heroine said that she came to express gratitude for the care during her illness. She also talked about her departure to the South Villa. Hearing from Rachel that there might be a spy in the estate, the Duchess was shocked and speechless, but the heroine reassured her, saying that everything was fine. She then handed her a box of cookies. Camilla gratefully accepted the treat and wished her a happy journey and a fun life in the South. Noticing her eyes warming, Rachel asked if she could write her letters. Although not for long, she would like to share how things are going in the villa. After thinking a little, the Duchess gave her permission. Hearing her answer, Rachel was delighted and thanked her, promising to send news as soon as she arrived. The heroine also asked her to take care of herself and her older brother, which surprised her. Rachel said that Lucian eats too little, although she forces him to eat more, but she was worried that in her absence, there would be no one to take care of him, so she thought it would be nice if the Duchess sometimes inquired about his health. The Duchess's eyes fluttered at her words, and she nodded in agreement. After leaving Camilla's room, Rachel ran to Lucian's room. She finished all her current affairs in advance so that no one would disturb them. The heroine wanted to spend as much time as possible with her pet before leaving, so she told him that she would be with him until he fell asleep. Lucian was delighted by her words. But when he heard that starting tomorrow, they would have to separate for a while, he was dumbfounded. Rachel shared with him the reasons for her departure and noted that she would be very glad if he went with her. Then Lucian offered to go together. He said that he also wanted to go south with her. Of course, the heroine was all for it, because she was ready to go with him anywhere. Even though Lucian was the heir, he believed that his absence for a few days would not cause any problems. Rachel agreed with him, and also believed that the presence of a spy could be dangerous for the heir. After a discussion with Rachel, Lucian decided to approach his father for permission. Pedro frowned slightly as he listened to his son. Lucian said that he wanted to go with Rachel, and he himself would protect her. But his father scolded him, accusing him of being completely relaxed lately, and extended his house arrest. At such moments, the hero could only bow his head and apologize. However, this was not enough for the Duke, and he noted that his behavior especially deteriorated after the appearance of Rachel, and therefore, she would live in the south until she made her debut. At his father's words, Lucian's eyes opened wide, as if he were being cut into pieces alive. The Duke wanted him to stay away from her. Lucian apologized again and assured him that he would not cause any more problems, as long as his father did not do this. But the Duke was adamant. He was extremely dissatisfied with his son's behavior. Lucian knew that his father was not one to change his mind, so he tried his best to convince him to change his mind. But the Duke intended to keep Rachel away from him. Usually, in secular society, it is customary to make your debut at the age of 19. But now, Rachel was only 12. So for Lucian, the next 7 years will be spent away from Rachel. Having finished the conversation, the Duke ordered Lucian to return to his room. The hero did not ask for anything serious, but only the opportunity to see each other for a short time, at least once a day, to visit her when she was sick, to put her to bed on days when it was hard for her. He only wanted these little things. Lucian was furious because he did not understand why even this small happiness was being taken away from him. Seeing his angry look and noticing the sparks of magic around him, the Duke asked his son if he was really trying to threaten him. The Duke reminded him that the heir must obey the head. Lucian shot his father a furious look. Then the Duke threatened to deprive him of his place as heir. Lucian felt a lump in his throat, and Encho again began to whisper to him about how much he needed power. The hero ignored Encho's words and removed his magic. He then slowly opened his mouth and looked at his father and said that as the heir of the ducal family, he would submit to the head and put all his energy into training to become a worthy heir. Therefore, he demanded that in the future, his father must transfer the title to him, after which he apologized for his insolence and headed towards the exit from Pedro's office. The Duke snorted at his words, but at the same time he liked what his son said. The events of his past were still spinning in Pedro's head. His father tormented and haunted him even after death. Shortly after Lucian was born, his father told him that the only true heir was his grandson Lucian, and that he was only a temporary replacement. The Duke thought with a grin that Lucian was his father's true grandson. Rachel, who had been anxiously awaiting her brother's return all this time, jumped up from her seat as soon as he opened the door. She immediately asked if the Duke had given his consent. Lucian said no with a sad voice. Hearing this, Rachel was upset, because she so wanted to go on a trip with her pet. However, the heroine tried to hide it, and, in order to reassure the hero, said that everything was fine, because she was only leaving for a couple of days. But after her words, Lucian became even more depressed, because he knew that Rachel was not leaving for a couple of days. The girl, who knew nothing, promised to buy souvenirs to cheer up her brother. Observing the hero's behavior, the heroine thought that he was upset because he could not travel with her, and thought it was cute. Suddenly, he affectionately called her name. Rejoicing with delight, Rachel immediately responded to his call. Suddenly placing his hands on her shoulders, he asked her not to forget him. Not understanding what he wanted to say, Rachel looked into his eyes in surprise, tilting her head to the side, and asked why he thought that she could forget him. Lucian's eyes filled with a strange warmth at her words, as if this was exactly what he wanted to hear, and he held her tightly to him. After that, he gently asked her to remember him and kissed her on the cheek. The heroine blushed and became confused from embarrassment. Excited, she began to say everything that came to mind without thinking. Seeing her like this, Lucian smiled tenderly again. Lucian was ready to wait as long as he could, as long as she didn't forget him. The next day, the Duke personally escorted his daughter to the carriage so that she could go south with her beastmen. He told her that the captain of the knightly order would guard her until the southern lands, and he added that excellent guards of elite knights were already waiting for her there, so she shouldn't worry. Rachel nodded and asked him to remember to take care of his health. Still, she was upset that due to house arrest, Lucian couldn't come out to say goodbye. The lump in her arms purred as if it wanted to cheer her up. Then, Rachel lightly poked him on the cheek to make him think about where he was. After the Duke finished saying everything he wanted, he hurried to invite her to get into the carriage. Unable to contain her feelings, the heroine at the last moment hesitantly asked her father to take care of Lucian. The Duke did not answer her request, but simply smiled bitterly. Then he again hurried her to get into the carriage in order to quickly hit the road. Having placed his daughter in the carriage, Pedro waved goodbye to her with a smile, after which the carriage slowly moved away. Lucian, holding the gift that the heroine had brought him, watched from the window as she climbed into the carriage. For the sake of reuniting with Rachel, he wanted to become a duke as soon as possible. Looking after her, the hero prayed for only one thing, that she would wait for him. Looking at the departing carriage, Lucian muttered seriously that he already missed her. The huge mansion on the seashore was a majestic structure, located among a well-kept garden and its own beach. Rachel was amazed by the beauty of the mansion and the landscape, as it turned out to be even more magnificent than she had imagined. Amazed by the beauty, Rachel told Amber that she was going out to play. After her rebirth, she saw the sea for the first time and immediately headed towards the water along with the beast people. She and Little Lump began to play in the water and splash water at each other. Demian, who had only been watching him all this time, decided to take revenge for the mistress and also join them. After some time, the maid announced that it was time for lunch. By this time, Rachel, Lump, and Damian were already soaking wet. Seeing this, Amber was dumbfounded. She immediately started drying Amber's hair with a towel so she wouldn't catch a cold. Suddenly, Lump, who was in the guise of a fox, shook out all the water from himself, thereby wetting everyone else. Rachel immediately scolded him, and Damian chased after him to catch him and punish him. While the two were playing catch-up, Rachel and the maid headed towards the mansion. There were many seafood dishes on the dining table. Rachel and the beastmen were delighted with these dishes. The heroine felt as if she was on summer vacation. While enjoying the dishes, Rachel thought that it would be better if Lucian could taste it too. Her heart began to flutter as soon as she imagined her pet against the backdrop of this paradise landscape. While they were eating, the fox excitedly invited the hostess to return to play on the shore after eating. Rachel instantly agreed, but Amber was worried that they would probably catch a cold this way. For the first week, the heroine enjoyed new sensations. However, life in the South, which she perceived as a short vacation, dragged on for a month. Rachel felt bored and sad being away from her brother. She already wanted to go back. While she was suffering from idleness, Amber suddenly announced that the Duke had sent her a letter. Having learned about this, Rachel was very happy. She opened the letter in the hope that it was written there that the spy had already been caught, and now she could return home. However, contrary to her expectations, the Duke informed him that she would have to stay there a little longer. After reading this, the heroine became despondent. She could not believe that she needed to hang around here any longer. Having thrown the letter, the girl began to beat the sofa with her hands and feet in despair. She was furious that she had been deceived, saying that it would not last long. Rachel wondered if she should write back that she didn't like it here, because then maybe he'd let her come back. However, she immediately changed her mind, thinking that the Duke might lose interest in her if she was capricious, and at the same time, she desperately wanted to see Lucian. Looking out the window, the heroine thought about her pet and wondered whether he had received her letter. All this time, Lucian diligently fulfilled all the demands of his father in order to maintain his place as heir. Passing by the young gentleman, the butler wished him good night. Looking at the hero, the butler noticed that he had an unhealthy complexion. He offered to help him, but he refused and went to his room. The man had no choice but to follow the young master's order and step aside. Encho continued to whisper in the hero's ear, trying to provoke him. However, as before, he continued to ignore him. Although he, Lucian, was exhausted, all his thoughts were about Rachel. Entering the room, the hero was upset because his father received a letter from Rachel, but he did not. Again, looking at the writing knife she had given him, he wondered why she didn't write to him. The butler knocked on the door of the Duke to give him some documents. With the master's permission, he entered his office and reported that he had brought letters from Mrs. Rachel. The butler then handed the Duke the folder of letters he had brought. One of the letters was intended for the Duchess, and the Duke told the butler to give the letter to her. Of the remaining ones, one was for the Duke, the other for Lucian. He put the letter that was intended for the hero in the drawer of his desk, along with the other letters addressed to him, after which he ordered the butler to bring him from now on all letters from Rachel and addressed to her. All this time, the heroine continued to live peacefully and carefree in the South. To relieve her boredom a little, she invited her friends to join her. The girls were delighted with the sea holiday, since it was their first time in the South. It's been 3 months since Rachel came to live in the South, and finally, she managed to invite her friends there. When she returned to her room, the maid informed her that she had letters from the ducal estate. The first was another letter from the Duke, where he tenderly greeted his daughter. In the letter, he informed Rachel that during this time they had found a spy in the estate, but he turned out to be only a mercenary blinded by money and was not the main instigator. However, progress was being made in the investigation, and they suspected that a pseudo-religious organization was involved in the case. Rachel was surprised to read this because she didn't remember the original having such a world setting. After reading the letter further, she became furious, since the Duke further wrote that he would continue the investigation and send her accurate news. But in the meantime, he asked her to stay in the South a little longer. After reading the letter, Rachel sighed in disappointment, but she still assumed that she would not be able to return yet. Another letter came from the Duchess. In the past, she did not even let the heroine into her room, but now she answered her letters. Opening the letter, Rachel thought that this could most likely be considered proof that she had somewhat recovered from her mental illness. In the letter, the Duchess said that, despite the fact that it is still a warm season, the sea breeze is colder than it seems, so she should take care of her health. She also answered her question about Lucian and said that he has been studying more lately, and he began to eat less, which worried the Duchess. Camilla was also worried about Lucian, so she asked Rachel to talk to him about it in a letter. Reading about this made Rachel worried. After all, he had a busy schedule before, but now he has even more studying. Rachel assumed that was why he didn't answer her letters. Thinking about this, she was upset, because she believed that they had become very close during this time, but Lucian did not find the time to write her even a line. She understood that he was busy, but she was still upset. Noah secretly met Count de Orlando and asked if he was sure that Cassandra had moved in. The Count assured him that he had definitely moved her in that day. He told Noah that, although rare, it happens that it takes time. Therefore, they came to the conclusion that they should wait a little longer. Noah was in high spirits because he believed that if they used Lady Leon's status, their business would go swimmingly. The Count shared his opinion, since one way or another, they all wanted the same thing, and believed that if they could take control, they would come to them in person. All this time, Lucian continued to write letters to Rachel again and again, to which during all this time, he never received answers. Encho continued to escalate the atmosphere, convincing him that the heroine had already forgotten about him. No matter how much Lucian tried to drive away these obsessive thoughts, the unreasonable absence of letters from Rachel gradually plunged him into despair. He didn't want to believe that Rachel no longer needed him, because she even gave him a gift. Suddenly, Encho advised him to ask him personally about the reasons. The great magician offered him his help, saying that he could deliver him to Rachel. Encho whispered to him that he should ask Rachel personally how she dared forget him. Lucian asked in surprise if he offered to meet with Rachel and find out everything from her herself. Unexpectedly for Encho, Lucian refused. He didn't want to put any more pressure on her. One of the reasons for his refusal was his dislike for Encho, but it was also the case that if Rachel's feelings had truly changed, he wouldn't be able to ask her to think again. After all, he hadn't changed a bit yet, so all he could do was retreat. Encho was still waiting for the moment when he would change his mind. Therefore, the great magician was ready to come to the aid of his descendant at any moment. The days flew by, and winter came, and Rachel was still in the Southlands. She had already given up hope of returning to the estate of the Duke Leon family. The Duke always wrote warm letters to her, but the question of her return remained unanswered. After so much time, the heroine realized that most likely the Duke did not want her to return. If only the fool didn't notice this! The heroine could hardly hold back tears of sadness, thinking about this, because she was rejected again. Just like before the relocation, then she was first escorted out of the house, having come up with reasons, such as to learn independence and all that. She then received notice that they had given up custody of her. Now the situation has developed in exactly the same way. While she was immersed in her thoughts, Lump unexpectedly called her, because he was worried that she was cold. Damien and Amber were also worried that she might be cold, so they brought her hot tea and a blanket. They called her to come inside. Besides, it was lunchtime. The maid came up to her and gave her hot tea to keep the girl warm, and Damien covered her with a blanket. Their words and actions warmed the heroine's soul. After all, now, unlike her previous life, there were people next to her who valued her and cared about her. However, despite the fact that the heroine gave up hope of returning, she still continued to send letters to members of the Leon family. Rachel, for her part, did not want to let go of the thread that had not yet broken. In addition, the Duchess responded to her very actively. Now that they were separated by distance, they communicated much more than when they lived together. Rachel thought that some relationships were built stronger by letters than by conversations. Unlike her, Lucian never answered her. The hero, as before, just trained and studied all day long in order to quickly achieve his goal. Suddenly, he heard Rachel's gentle voice calling him. However, when he turned around, he found no one. He called her, but there was no answer. Returning to his room, he began to copy the books. And suddenly, her clear and ringing voice was heard again in the silence. But this time, looking around, he did not find anyone. Over time, Lucian became more and more depressed, and recently even began to hallucinate. Encho expressed his sympathy for the fact that he was slowly going crazy. However, Lucian did not want to listen to him, so he ordered him to disappear. At that moment, Rachel's voice was heard again behind him, who, as usual, called him and asked where he was going. Then she ran up to him with a smile and offered to go together. He immediately turned around and excitedly tried to hug her. However, as soon as his hands touched her, she disappeared again. And again her voice sounded behind him. Then, wherever he looked, the image of his sweet little sister stood before his eyes, and her gentle and affectionate voice, full of love and care, sounded from everywhere. His mind was clouded, although he understood that it was unreal, but he could not get rid of these visions. Finding her son in such a state, barely standing, the Duchess was extremely concerned. Her desperate cry helped Lucian come to his senses. Looking at her chalk-pale son, she said worriedly that she would call the doctor now. The hero wanted to refuse because he needed to follow the schedule, but the Duchess was adamant. She insisted that Lucian rest in his room, since his health came first, and promised to talk to the Duke herself. Lucian had to agree, and together with his mother, he returned to the room where he went to bed. He then awkwardly thanked the Duchess for her concern. The hero was very surprised when Camilla responded by asking if he really missed Rachel that much. The Duchess said that after her sudden departure, even she felt sad. In addition, she noticed that Lucian had lost a lot of weight since the heroine left the estate. But what surprised the hero most of all was his mother's words that Rachel said that she also missed this place. Camilla told him that she and the heroine sometimes exchange letters. Upon learning of this, Lucian became even more upset because Rachel, who even wrote to the Duchess, for some reason did not send him a single letter. Rachel, as usual, had lunch and chatted happily with the beast people. She was very happy when the maid served seafood pasta with hot sauce. Since the fox didn't know what hot sauce was, Rachel couldn't wait for him to try it. While the heroine was enjoying the taste of spicy food, Damien and Lump almost choked on it. Amber hurried to pour water for them, but the fox was at a loss and did not understand why the mistress would eat this. The maid offered Rachel to drink some water too, but she refused and happily continued eating. Rachel made fun of the beast people that they could not know all the delights of spicy dishes, but Lump thought that she had strange preferences. Looking at them, Rachel thought that she wanted to continue to live happily with these people. There was a time when Lucian was one of them, but for more than 6 months, there was no letter from him. It was as if he had completely forgotten her. Rachel assumed that this was a standard ending for a supporting character. For the love story of the main characters, minor characters naturally disappear from the sight and thoughts of the main characters. Lucian was confused at this time. He couldn't understand where he had made a mistake and why Rachel was writing to everyone but him. The hero suggested that perhaps she was offended because he could not visit when she was sick. Or she may have been disappointed that he didn't even see her off due to house arrest. And with all this, he asked her not to forget. Taking advantage of his despair, Encho again suggested not to guess alone, but to go ask her himself. But Lucian was afraid that she would say that she was disgusted with him. He was afraid of her answer. Encho continued to persuade him, saying that he would like to meet his beloved, even despite the contempt. The great magician said that he had a man whom he loved so much that he was ready to give his life. He was ready to even sell his soul to the devil if it would allow them to meet again. But Lucian had the opportunity to meet Rachel, and Encho was ready to help him. As a result, the hero agreed and turned to Encho for help. Like last time, the great magician inhabited the body of his descendant and teleported with him to the southern estate. He then left the hero's body, saying that they had already arrived. Lucian came to his senses and found himself standing in Rachel's room. Lucian hesitantly called out to the sleeping heroine. Seeing that the girl was already asleep, Encho suggested returning later, but Lucian refused to leave. Before meeting Rachel, the hero lived like a ghost. His father despised him, and he couldn't even see his mother. The servants of the estate had no choice but to adapt to the behavior of the owner. There was no place for Lucian anywhere. When the heroine first invited him to a tea party, he decided that she wanted to deceive him. But later, Lucian realized that this was not so, and she only showed sincere friendliness. It seemed to him that through her, he was receiving recognition. It was enough for the hero that only Rachel would be there. However, he did not understand why she so suddenly decided to leave him. Suddenly, Rachel muttered Lucian's name in her sleep. The hero immediately ran up to her worriedly. He realized that Rachel had not forgotten him. Lucian decided that he too would try until the day of her return arrived. He still didn't dare touch her or wake her up, and he asked Encho to take him back. The hero decided that when they meet again, he will change beyond recognition. He only asked Rachel one thing, that she wait for him. It's been 7 years since Rachel moved to the Southlands. Amber was waiting for Rachel, who was hurrying towards her. The maid told the heroine that everyone had already gathered and was waiting for her. As soon as Rachel arrived, Amber announced to everyone that she had arrived with a smile. Then all her friends congratulated her on her 19th birthday. Rachel thanked them happily. Then a small party began in honor of her birthday. A gift from the Duke also arrived along with a letter. The maid was glad they arrived before Rachel's birthday came to an end. After reading the letter, the heroine sighed. The worried fox reincarnated as a human and asked what happened to her. Rachel said that since she had already turned 19, the Duke was writing for her to return to the capital for her debut. The fox did not know what a debut was and looked at her in surprise. Rachel explained to him that this is when you officially enter secular society and receive recognition from everyone else who has already reached the age of majority. At the same time, you expose yourself to the marriage market. Scenes from her past life flashed through the heroine's head when her adoptive parents told her that she was already an adult and should start an independent life. She decided that with this letter, the Duke was trying to say that he would take care of her wedding. However, she did not plan to get married. So Rachel thought it might be best to ask the Duke to help her with her business. The heroine was sure that opening a spicy food restaurant would be a success, but the fox warned her that this business was doomed to failure. Rachel got angry when she heard this, but the fox immediately ran away so as not to have to explain himself. The heroine tisked displeasedly after he left. She again lowered her eyes to the Duke's letter, where he affectionately asked her to return to the capital as soon as possible. He wrote that for the first time in a long time, the whole family would gather together in the capital. All this time, the Duke often came to the south to see Rachel. The Duchess regularly responded to her letters, maintaining communication, but Lucian never answered her to a single letter. The heroine only knew that he was exterminating demonic creatures, and that was from newspaper articles. Several years ago, attacks by demonic creatures began to break out throughout the Empire, and Lucian and the Knightly Order of Leon are doing an excellent job of dealing with the problem. The heroine hoped that she would meet Lucian in the capital. He was already 24 years old, but Rachel could not imagine what he looked like, because only his childhood image remained in her memory. The heroine was ready to leave the hero when the time came, but she was furious that they were forcibly separated. Rachel wondered how far Lucian and Noah's relationship had come in 7 years. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice was heard. The voice kept repeating that this was his body. The heroine did not hear the unknown voice, but after these words, she got a headache. Rachel didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it was the result of overwork. The voice continued to repeat that it would certainly take her body into its hands. The knights, led by the junior duke, participated in the campaign against the demonic beasts. Lucian fought bravely, using sword and magic to protect his comrades. The knights admired his skill with the sword and magical abilities. After killing another beast, Lucian announced that they must clear the area today. He wanted to return to the capital as soon as possible. Lucian was looking forward to meeting Rachel. The day after her birthday, Rachel headed back to the capital. She was looking forward to this trip, and most of all, she wanted to meet her favorite again. While she was riding in the carriage, she accidentally dozed off. The unknown voice again began to insult her and try to take control of her body. Suddenly, she woke up with an uneasy feeling, hearing an incomprehensible voice. However, the fox and Amber, who were sitting right in front of her, did not hear anything. The maid assumed that the heroine had simply had a bad dream, and she said with a smile that they had already entered the gates of the estate. The last time Rachel came to the capital's estate was to prepare for the imperial ball. Thinking about the imperial ball, she remembered her and Lutian dancing in the garden, separately from everyone else. She longed for these times. When the carriage stopped, the butler opened the door and greeted her. As she stood to leave the carriage, Lucian gently called her name and extended his hand. The large, pale hand seemed to shine brightly in the sun, and just by looking at the porcelain-like skin of the hand and thumbs, the heroine immediately knew who it was. Rachel was looking forward to this meeting madly, but did not expect that he would be waiting for her outside. Without thinking, she reached out to his majestically outstretched hand. Lucian gently kissed the back of her hand and said that he was looking forward to her. When Lucian said these words, her fingers trembled, and she ran up to him with a smile, expressing her joy at their meeting. However, to her great surprise, Lucian was not the only one waiting for her. The Duchess also approached the carriage and greeted it with a smile. Rachel couldn't believe her luck. These two came out to meet her together. The Duchess told her that the Duke would be back for dinner, so she would have to wait. Then Lucian, with a smile, invited her to take a walk in the garden together. But Camilla stopped him, saying that Rachel needed to rest after a long journey. But the heroine was so inspired by the meeting with her brother that she herself wanted to go for a walk with him. These words brought a gentle and warm smile to his face. Looking at them, the Duchess let them go for a walk, and she went to the mansion, saying that she would send the servants for them as soon as the table was set. Amber and the beastmen also left them and went to unpack their luggage. When everyone left, Rachel immediately took his hand and called him with a smile. They had often held hands like this when they were little, but now it felt different. He was taller than 7 years ago, as was Rachel. The heroine sulked at him because he did not answer her letters, but as soon as she saw him again, all the grievances disappeared. Looking at her pet, she thought about her relationship with Noah, because in the original, at about this age, they were already close. Her thoughts were interrupted by the gentle voice of Lucian, who said that he missed her. Rachel lowered her eyes in embarrassment and replied that she missed her too. Seeing the doubt in her eyes, he gently touched her cheek and lifted her head to look straight into her eyes. Lucian then reiterated that he missed her very much. Looking into his eyes, Ray did not understand why he did not write letters in this case. However, she decided not to ruin the moment of the meeting, and smiling, replied that she also missed her very much. Since the hero could not attend her birthday, he decided, albeit belatedly, to congratulate her at least now. He handed her a small pink box, which the heroine opened with curiosity. Rachel was amazed when she saw the gift. These were wonderful emerald earrings. She happily thanked him for such a lovely gift. Then Lucian invited her to try them on and said that he would help with this. The heroine agreed with pleasure and thanked her. Lucian helped her put on her earrings. They both felt a little awkward after being apart for a long time. After finishing, Lucian took a step back and said that these earrings suited her very well. He then asked her to wear them on her debut day. Looking at her, he involuntarily smiled. All this time he really worked very hard, thinking about her. Rachel was delighted to say that she had read about him in the news. From the newspapers, she learned that Lucian was leading a punitive campaign against monsters and was awarded a medal by the emperor himself. She was very proud that everyone around him praised him, but at the same time, she was worried that he would have to go on a punitive campaign again. But the hero told her that he wouldn't have to, because this time they searched the lair of the black magicians who created the monsters, and everyone was arrested. Realizing that Lucian was too busy to have a social life, Rachel was a little disappointed as she was curious how Noah was doing. For the first time in his entire life, Lucian was speechless, and it was because of Rachel's words about the young Lord of House Castile. He didn't understand why she suddenly started talking about him, but looking at her eyes sparkling like the night sky, he became more and more anxious. Lucian suggested that Noah might have visited her while she lived in the south, but she immediately denied this. Hearing this, Lucian felt relieved. Rachel was worried that due to the heavy workload, the hero did not have time for love, and gladly invited him to relax and attend social events while he could. She also asked me to convey greetings to Noah from her when we meet. Lucian was extremely unhappy that, being next to him, Rachel continued to talk about my Lord Castile. When Lucian said he wanted to be with her, Rachel awkwardly replied that she did too. Not understanding why the hero's mood soured, Rachel decided to change the subject. She said she was pleasantly surprised to see Lucian and the Duchess come out together to greet her. Lucian himself did not understand how it happened that they became close. Ever since he met his mother during his dream of Rachel, she suddenly began to worry about him. She apologized for past indifference and asked for forgiveness. Only for Lucian it didn't matter. However, thanks to his mother, the hero was able to find out news about Rachel. But Lucian decided not to tell the heroine everything and limited himself to the message that the Duchess was already better. Rachel was delighted to learn that they had been eating together lately, and that the Duchess went out from time to time. Since they had been walking for some time, Lucian invited Rachel to sit down and continue the conversation. When they sat down, Lucian asked how Rachel had been doing all this time. Ray was surprised by his question and replied that everything was as she had written in her letters. Lucian was amazed to hear about the letters. From his reaction, Rachel realized that he had not received her letter, and when she heard that he had not received a single letter, she was stunned. Lucian immediately realized that this was the work of his father. Rachel told him that, having not received a single answer from him, she decided that he had forgotten her. Lucian immediately replied that he would never forget her, and he added that he thought she was avoiding him. But Rachel immediately denied these words, saying that she had no need to avoid her beloved brother. Finding out that Lucian had not forgotten or ignored her, Rachel felt relieved and her eyes filled with tears. The hero gently hugged her to calm her down. At that moment, Lucian made a firm decision to do everything possible to prevent this from happening again. During an audience with the Emperor, the Duke and His Majesty discussed the problem of pseudo-religion and sectarians. The king appreciated Lucian's significant contribution to the capture of these people and the destruction of the monsters. The Duke believed that the Emperor was exaggerating the significance of his son's actions. His Majesty had great hopes for the younger Duke and expected him to inherit the title of Duke this year. However, Pedro decided to postpone this issue for a while. After meeting with the Emperor, the Duke had a terrible headache. It all started 7 years ago with the kidnapping of Rachel. A religious sect worshipping the Demon King began to creep out from everywhere. Traitors to the Empire, they kidnapped people and brainwashed them. In recent years, they have plunged the Empire into chaos by creating demonic beasts using sulfur magic. And it was none other than Lucian who revealed this truth and performed many outstanding feats. But the Duke still could not recognize him. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a servant, who announced that they had already arrived. Opening the carriage door, the butler informed the Duke that Lady Rachel had already arrived. Pedro immediately rushed to her room to greet her. Despite the Duke's high spirits, Rachel greeted him coldly and formally. She was upset by the letters, so she decided to ask the question directly. The Duke was stunned to realize that she already knew everything. Pedro did not make excuses, since everything was obvious, and he understood that Rachel was most likely upset. He replied that he did so only out of concern for her. The Duke told her of his concerns about Lucian. He said he was worried that Lucian might be a bad influence on her. The more he talked, the more upset she became. The heroine realized that Pedro still sees his father in Lucian. Looking straight into the Duke's eyes, she said that the brother she knew was kinder and more sympathetic than anyone else. Rachel asked him to stop projecting someone else onto Lucian and accept him for who he is. This time, the Duke promised to think about it. Lucian took the fruit basket and went to Rachel, just like old times. When he knocked on the door, Rachel, as before, came out to greet him with a bright smile. She happily took his hand with both of hers and pulled him along so that he entered the room. The heroine happily reported that she had found all the letters she had sent him and handed over the box with these letters. Lucian was so happy that he wanted to read them right away. But Rachel forbade him, telling him to read them in his room. She was too shy and did not want to be present while he read. They then sat down on the sofa, and Lucian gave her a basket of fruit. Remembering the old days, Rachel brought the grape to Lucian's mouth again to feed him. And again, she began to sing the same song as 7 years ago. Lucian smiled and, as before, parted his lips. Suddenly, Rachel asked him again about brother Noah. Lucian was unhappy and asked why she kept asking him about my lord Castius. Then Rachel realized that she was trying to force him too, obviously. She made the excuse that she just wanted her and Lucien to be friends. But this didn't make Lucian's mood any better. Rachel, as before, began to say that his brother was the best and sweetest, to cheer him up. But Lucian gagged her with a grape. Rachel was happy, because this was the first time he had fed her. Returning to his room, he immediately began reading letters from Rachel. As he read them, he imagined Rachel, who had been writing unanswered letters all these 7 years. He complained that Rachel abandoned him, but it turned out to be the opposite. Lucian was glad that they were finally together, but he was bothered by her constant questions about Noah, and he even began to suspect that she liked him. Noticing Lucian in the corridor in the middle of the night, the Duke asked what he was doing there, but the hero did not explain anything, but only said that it was time for him to leave and left. For the Duke, his every step looked suspicious. He couldn't trust Lucian to be responsible for either the family or Rachel. Rachel was very glad that she and Lucian had cleared up the misunderstanding. True, she was upset by the Duke's attitude towards his son. The lump ran happily in the yard. He really liked their new home. Damien, as usual, followed him, trying to calm him down. Rachel loved watching her mischievous beast men. In the original, Oscar was a character with a rebellious spirit who overreacted to everything. He suffered more than enough due to the fact that he was born a beast man, and this left many wounds on his soul. But now Oscar has become completely different, sweet and cheerful. Therefore, Rachel believed that since Oscar could change so much, then the relationship between the Duke and Lucian could too. Opening the door to her room, Rachel was extremely surprised. Standing outside the door was Lucian, who greeted her with a smile and told her that he had come for her. She immediately ran up to him joyfully, and together they headed to the dining room. Seeing Lucian in the morning, Rachel immediately felt that she had returned to the Leon family. Lucian also felt as if everything was finally falling into place. In a nightmare, they did not want to imagine that someone else would take the heroine's heart and she would go to him. The hero was ready to do anything, just not to be separated from her again. Lucian was lost in thought and did not notice how Rachel called him several times, and, finally coming to his senses, he asked her how the night went. Rachel replied with a smile that she slept like a baby. Lucian told her that he had read all the letters she wrote to him, and also thanked her that despite the fact that he did not have the opportunity to answer her, she continued to write. While they were talking, they did not notice how they reached the door of the dining room. As soon as they approached, the servants announced their arrival and opened the doors for them. The Duke and Duchess, who were already sitting at the table, invited them to join with a smile. Rachel was delighted to see that Camilla was also eating breakfast with them. The Duchess invited her to sit next to her, and she happily agreed. Approaching the table, the hero ordered his cutlery to be moved to an adjacent place. He decided to sit opposite Rachel. Just like old times, the heroine told the Duchess that they sat like this at the table in childhood. Then, Camilla invited everyone to sit opposite each other this time. The Duke was surprised, but agreed. After he moved, they started breakfast. After breakfast, the heroine went for a walk around the capital with the beast people, as Lucian was busy working with documents. Suddenly, she saw Noah in the city. Rachel immediately ordered the carriage to stop and ran after him. Noah drank aromatic tea in a cafe in the city center and enjoyed it. Suddenly, Rachel ran up to him and greeted him. Noah only remembered her after she introduced herself. At first, he decided that Cassandra had possessed her, but when he saw her surprised face, he realized that this was not so. Rachel was happy to see Noah and decided to ask him about Lucian, since Lucian didn't want to talk about him. To make it easier for them to talk, Noah invited Rachel to join him for a cup of tea. While Rachel was busy talking with Noah, the Beastmen announced that they would wait for her nearby. The hero was extremely surprised to learn that Rachel had left the mansion. Amber told him that she had gone for a walk in the capital. Lucian was furious because he thought the heroine was resting in the room. He was terribly afraid that something might happen to her. Seeing his concern, Encho offered to help him find his sister. Lucian tried not to pay attention to him and avoided communication. Since Lucian had flatly refused his help, Encho thought that perhaps it would be better to hide it on purpose. But he told Rachel about his favorite cafe and tea. Rachel tried the tea he recommended and liked it, but he tried to win her sympathy and gave her various strange compliments. Watching his behavior, Rachel understood why Noah and Lucian were never able to get close. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by Lucian, who burst into the cafe worriedly. Rachel was very surprised to see Lucian. Noticing Noah next to Rachel, Lucian angrily asked what he had to do with her. The shocked guy replied that they were just drinking tea together. Then Lucian said that, with his permission, he too would join them. Rachel and Noah then began discussing Rachel's debut and her look that day. Lucian, silently watching them, could barely contain his rage. He showed with all his appearance that he did not like Noah. The heroine was disappointed because the relationship between Lucian and Noah was not like a romantic story. Unable to bear Lucian's piercing gaze any longer, Noah said goodbye and left. Rachel had no choice but to say goodbye in return. After he left, the excited hero asked Rachel why she left without telling him a word. Rachel explained that she simply didn't want to distract him from his work. Lucian was very worried about the heroine, so when he saw that she was safe and sound, he hugged her tightly and asked her not to do that from now on. Seeing him in this state, Rachel couldn't even be angry. Since Lucian was already in the city, the heroine suggested taking a walk together. She then informed the beastmen what would happen to her brother next, and told them to return to the mansion before nightfall. After Demian and Lump left, Lucian suggested that Rachel go to the atelier first, to pick out a dress for her debut. Lucian wanted his and Rachel's outfits to match. Hearing this, the heroine immediately agreed and hurried into the carriage. The king believed that the debutante ball was the most appropriate moment to introduce the prince. He was sure that everyone would praise the appearance of a new prince, Elliot. Lucian and Rachel were busy choosing the right outfits for their debut until the evening. Then they headed to the mansion in high spirits. That day, the heroine was very tired, so she dozed off in the carriage, and Lucian gently hugged her shoulders to make it more comfortable for her to sleep. Suddenly, Enko asked him who he wanted to be for Rachel. The hero did not know what to answer. He wanted to be the closest person to her. Unexpectedly, the great magician said that the heroine looked very familiar, and he had seen her somewhere. When they arrived, Lucian decided not to wake the heroine and took her in his arms. A worried Duke ran out to meet them, very worried because they had returned too late. Lucian told him that they had been in the studio all this time. The Duke tried to reprimand him for walking late at night, but Lucian did not listen to him and returned to the mansion, since it was cold outside. The Duke was confused because he didn't even have time to say anything properly. Lucian gently laid the sleeping Rachel on the bed, trying not to wake her. Looking at her, Lucian thought that he did not want her to get married and leave him alone again. As he left her room, he ordered Amber to change her clothes. Walking in the yard, Demian felt something was wrong. He immediately turned into a falcon and flew to the lady's windows. Looking at her, he noticed that something was wrong with her mana. Demian immediately started scratching the window and making noise to wake Rachel up. She woke up from the noise, and noticing Demian outside the window, worriedly let him into the room. Falcon again took on human form and excitedly asked if everything was okay with her. He told Rachel that something strange was happening with her mana, but Rachel didn't even know what mana was. Demian explained to her that this is a unique energy that fills her soul. He said that the Falcon Beastmen had the ability to recognize the color and flow of mana, and her mana had just become cloudy. Rachel suggested it might be fatigue, and said there was no need to worry. After making sure that everything was okay with the hostess, Demian apologized and left. Although Demian did not insist on his own, he clearly saw that the mistress's mana was shining brighter than anyone else's. But at the same time, there is a danger that at any moment it can become cloudy, dissipate and disappear altogether. It is weaker than ordinary mana, like a fragment broken off from something. Cassandra was extremely surprised that the falcon was able to sense her, and decided to be on the alert for a while. In the morning, Amber diligently helped Gashelle prepare for her debut. A few minutes later, Lucian came for his sister. Rachel complimented his appearance with a smile and asked what he thought of her. Without hesitation, Lucian replied that she looked beautiful. Rachel also told him that the doll was sent by the studio along with the dress. Rachel suggested that Lucian get a doll that looked like her to keep an eye on him while he worked. Lucian happily agreed and placed the doll in his magical subspace. There he kept his most valuable things. Lucian then extended his hand to her and told her it was time to go. Without hesitation, Rachel took his hand and they set off for their debut. The Duke and Duchess were already ready and waiting for them. When they arrived at the ball, the Duke and Duchess stepped aside to discuss some matters with other aristocrats. Lucian asked Rachel if she wanted something to drink. Before Rachel could answer, young aristocrats and aristocrats surrounded Lucian to talk to him. Rachel wanted to move away so as not to disturb him, but Lucian announced to everyone who wanted to talk that he was now accompanying my lady, and it was better to postpone the conversation until later. The young aristocrats were puzzled, but agreed. The treats looked very appetizing, so the heroine offered to try it. She was surprised to find spicy food on the table. Elliot watched her the whole time. After she had had her fill of the spicy treats, Lucian asked her to her first dance. Rachel happily agreed to give him her first dance. Rachel's friends suddenly approached, and she had to move away for a while. In addition, many were really looking forward to when they parted, so that they could talk to Lucian. Noticing Rachel, Noah also hurried over to greet her. After some time, the Emperor and Empress also joined the ball. Everyone present bowed their heads to them as a sign of respect. While the Emperor made his speech, Elliot stood proudly next to him. Seeing his face, Rachel immediately remembered that this was the same Elliot who kidnapped her 7 years ago. Now, standing behind the Emperor, he looked her straight in the eyes. The Emperor concluded his speech with good news. He said that he had recently been reunited with his son, who had been lost in the past. Since he was not born by the Empress, he was raised outside the palace, and at some point the connection with him disappeared. And thanks to a miracle, he was found again. After his words, Elliot Solionis introduced himself and greeted the guests. Rachel was terrified, because in the original, Elliot never found his father, while now, because of her words, he became a prince. Noticing Ray was acting strangely, Lucian worriedly asked what was wrong, but she couldn't tell the truth, so she replied that she was just a little worried. Then, Lucian gently took her hand and tried to calm her down. Next to the hero, the excitement subsided, and she felt safe. After the Emperor personally congratulated all the debutantes and debutantes, it was time for the first dance. But before the heroes could start dancing, Elliot suddenly called Rachel. Coming closer, he asked Rachel to dance. She was confused and didn't understand what was on his mind. While Rachel was frantically thinking about how to unobtrusively refuse him, Lucian answered for her and said that she could not dance because she was not feeling well. He informed the prince that due to great excitement, she had turned pale and was trembling, so she should rest a little. After such explanations, even Elliot could not object. Lucian then picked her up, and they went to find a quiet place to rest. After they left, the heroine relaxed a little and thanked her brother for his help. At that moment, the heroes realized that they preferred silence to crowded places. When the sounds of music were heard, Lucian looked into her eyes and said that it would be a pity not to dance in such luxurious outfits. He then stood up and asked her to dance. Rachel accepted his invitation, and they, just like in the past, enveloped in the glow of moonlight, danced alone with each other. Elliot decided to follow so as not to lose sight of Rachel, but he noticed that the girl had eluded him and was now having fun. Elliot was upset because he even became a prince to meet her. After her debut, Rachel began to be inundated with invitation letters. While she was dealing with these letters, the Duke invited her for a walk. He wanted to remember the past and take a walk with his daughter. Rachel happily agreed. After a short walk, they stopped at a cafe where they rumored to serve delicious desserts. While the Lies were sitting in the cafe, she suddenly noticed Noah, and Lucian walked next to him. Seeing them together, she thought that they were dating in secret from her. Then the heroine was happy, suggesting that there was still hope for the Lucian-Noah pairing. Noticing them, she immediately invited her father to return so that he would not see Lucian. While they were riding in the carriage, the Duke decided to take this opportunity to tell her about her uncle. The Duke said that most likely Derek de Orlando is related to the religious sect that kidnapped her. Then he asked if she knew anything about it. Then, Rachel said that when she was kidnapped, she saw her uncle in the company of some strange group of people. The Duke was stunned by this news, but the heroine added that she wasn't sure, so she didn't tell. Noah was glad that the younger Duke visited the restaurant under his management. He also invited Lucian to come along with Rachel, but the hero left without answering his invitation. Having reached the carriage, Lucian asked his assistant about some information, and he replied that the materials received were inside. There were papers in the carriage containing information about Noah. Noah DeCastia has been rapidly expanding his business lately. However, this also drove him into huge debts, and currently, the proceeds do not cover the investment. After reading this, Lucian was convinced that Noah was not suitable for Rachel. When he returned home, he was greeted by Rachel. She ran up to him as usual and greeted him. Rachel waited with sparkling eyes for Lucian to share with her his love story with Noah, but Lucian did not understand what she was trying to achieve, because the one he likes is her. Suddenly, the hero asked Rachel if she liked Noah. The heroine answered without hesitation that she liked it. Hearing this, Lucian became upset. Seeing that Lucian's mood instantly soured after her answer, Rachel came to the conclusion that Lucian was incorrectly assuming that they were in a love triangle. She hastened to explain to him that everything was wrong. Rachel explained that she doesn't have feelings for Noah and doesn't want to become his girlfriend. She explained that she was only interested in Noah as a person. After these words, Lucian felt relieved. Rachel also told Lucian that she went out with the Duke and bought a gift for him. The gift was dessert, which she happily fed to Lucian. From her hands, everything was delicious for Lucian, and at the same time, due to Encho's influence, he should not have felt the taste. After dessert, Rachel told Lucian about the conversation with the Duke about her uncle. Rachel shared her feelings about Erlando's family. Lucian was always ready to be there and support her in everything. Leaving Rachel's room, Lucian was transported to his magical subspace. He brought the desserts here, given to Rachel, to use magic to preserve them forever. Encho thought Lucian was crazy and didn't understand what he wanted from Rachel. Lucian himself did not know the answer to this question, but he realized that he was obsessed with her. The hero did not want to give Rachel to someone else. Then Encho suggested locking her up, because then she would be safe and nearby. But Lucian could not do this. The next day, Rachel's pleasant time with the Beastmen was interrupted by the prince, who wanted to meet her. Rachel greeted him according to etiquette. The lump immediately recognized Elliot and told Demian. They immediately fenced her off from the prince to protect her. Not understanding the reason for their actions, the Duke apologized to the prince. After the Duke left, Elliot expressed his regret to the heroine that they could not dance at the ball. Rachel was wary because she didn't understand what he was trying to achieve. With a grin, he thanked Rachel for telling him who his father was. Elliot said he lost one of his eyes because of the sauce she threw in his face, so he went south and watched her all the time, waiting for a chance for revenge. However, she seemed nice to him, and he took a liking to her. And more than revenge, he was seized by the desire to take possession of her. That's why he wanted Rachel to be his wife. Elliot didn't understand why she was hesitating, because the title of prince fits perfectly with a duke's daughter. The more Rachel listened to him, the more convinced she became that he was crazy. Their conversation was interrupted by Lucian, who asked why the prince had come. Elliot replied that he had business with my lady, and with a smile, he added that he had just proposed to her. Hearing this, Lucian decided to join their conversation and ordered another chair to be brought. Rachel tried to decline as politely as possible. She said that she was not going to get married yet, and added that the prince was not her type anyway. Then Elliot asked who was her type. In response, Rachel described her brother in as much detail as possible. However, it turned out that the emperor and duke had already approved this marriage. Now she could no longer refuse so thoughtlessly, so she asked for time to think about this decision. Having said all he had to say, Elliot left. Returning to the room, Lucian asked Rachel how she knew the prince. She did not talk about the kidnapping, but only changed the subject. Lucian was furious that his father agreed to this marriage. On the other hand, he understood that even if not now, then still in the future, he would constantly have to observe a similar picture. Encho continued to suggest to Lucian that he lock her in subspace. These thoughts gave Lucian a headache. He lay down on Rachel's lap to calm down. The heroine gently stroked his hair and sang a lullaby, trying to calm him down. At this time, Lucian, pondering Encho's words, believed that subspace would strangle Rachel, and decided to prepare a house just for the two of them, where no one would see her except him. Although the heroine was the one who lulled Lucian to sleep, she eventually fell asleep herself, and he picked her up to put her on the bed. Having put her to bed, the hero carefully covered her with a blanket, as he always did. Leaving Rachel's room, he hurried to his father to discuss the prince's marriage proposal. However, it turned out that the Duke was hearing about this for the first time. Lucian was furious, thinking that this was a sign of disrespect for their family. Although they took the form of a vassal and a master, the imperial family and Leon were in an allied relationship. After all, according to history, they founded an empire together and now simply adhere to a certain status. But the Duke stopped him before he crossed the line due to being on edge and emphasized that they were loyal vassals of the imperial family. Lucian was disappointed because he saw that even when the entire empire was worried about the appearance of monsters, the imperial family did not take any action. To prevent similar incidents like the prince's from happening again, Lucian insisted that his father should pass on the title of Duke to him. Waking up, Rachel found out that the Duchess was calling her and hurried to her. Camilla was very worried about something. She needed to talk to the Duke, but she couldn't muster up the courage, so she asked Rachel to go with her. The heroine happily agreed. The Duke refused his son's proposal because he believed it was too early for this, but Lucian was adamant because over the years, he fulfilled all the duties of the heir and even more. Everyone, both inside and outside the estate, recognized the hero as the owner of the Leon family, and only Pedro still did not know about it. And now Lucian no longer asked, but demanded that his father give him the title. Otherwise, he threatened to take it away by force. The Duke became angry at his son's behavior and grabbed him by the collar. But Lucian was no longer at the age to silently accept his beatings. Their argument was interrupted by the unexpected appearance of the Duchess and Rachel. Seeing this scene, Camilla assumed that the Duke was treating Lucian the same way as before and demanded an explanation. The Duke tried to explain the situation to her, but she did not listen. Suddenly, she bowed her head in front of him and admitted that it was her fault, and Lucian was not to blame for anything. She blamed herself for loving Pedro too much, and she hoped that over time, he would love her too. So she told the past Duke about him and Liam. Pedro was stunned by this news. The Duchess cried and asked for forgiveness. She admitted her guilt and tried to accept it, but did not want the Duke to hate Lucian, because the boy was not to blame. The Duke was in shock and did not even know how to react to her words. Camilla felt sick from severe stress, and he only ordered to take her to the room and call a doctor. Lucian and Ray helped the Duchess to her room. After examining her, the doctor reported that the Duchess was exhausted from weakness and recommended paying attention to replenishing nutrients. The heroes then went to Lucian's room to discuss the situation. Lucian honestly told her how it all happened. Rachel tried to console him, since it was obvious that his father did not recognize his efforts and merits. Lucian was delighted when he heard words of support from the heroine, because only her opinion was important to him. Rachel promised that she would always be by his side. Sitting alone, the Duke replayed the Duchess's words over and over in his head. He tried to understand at what point everything went wrong. Father forced Pedro to break up with Liam. However, marrying Camilla was purely his decision, but he was unable to fulfill his marital duty, and the Duchess developed mental illness. And his son Lucian was not like that from the beginning. As a child, he desperately sought his love. Now, having put everything into perspective, the Duke realized that Rachel was right. Just because of his resemblance to his grandfather, the Duke treated the innocent child unfairly for a long time. Throughout his life, Pedro considered himself a victim, but for his wife and son, he was a tyrant. Realizing his mistakes, the Duke began to prepare Lucian to accept the title. However, both he and the Duchess isolated themselves from everyone. The fox, who had been asking to change his name all this time, finally got his way. Since the plot was already different from the original, Rachel decided to return it to its original name, Oscar. Oscar was incredibly happy about his new name. Lucian suddenly joined them and asked Rachel to help him with something. He asked her to help sort the invitation letters. The heroine agreed with pleasure, because she understood that Lucian was already very busy. The hero just wanted to be in the same room with her. However, now, looking at her, he wanted her to sit next to him. Having completed her task, Rachel offered to help with other small tasks. There were no tasks yet, and they decided to have tea. But while they were waiting for the maid, the conversation turned to Lucian's future partner, and Rachel said that no matter who he was, she would always support him. Their conversation was interrupted by the maid, who, at the heroine's request, brought tea and grapes. Rachel went back to feeding her pet. But this time, the hero also decided to feed her. Now, being so close to her and seeing her charming smile, he realized his feelings for her. Realizing that he had far from friendly feelings for her, he suddenly took her in his arms. And then he squeezed him tightly in his arms. Rachel was confused, because all this time, Lucian didn't say a word. Encho continued to talk incessantly in his head, offering the easiest and most effective way to get her completely. But he pushed these thoughts away from himself and promised Rachel that he would later tell about his loved one. Lucian had already decided for himself that no matter what Rachel's response to his feelings was, he would never let her go. The next day, Rachel sorted her invitations to social events. It was difficult for her to select the most important ones, and the Duchess was in no condition to help with matters. The same could be said about the Duke. Suddenly, the Duchess called her, and she hurried to her. She told Rachel that she and the Duke had met and had a heart-to-heart talk. She also said that, starting from this imperial ball, she and the Duke planned to resign. In the evening, the maid announced that the outfit for the imperial ball had arrived, and the doll was again attached to the outfit, and the younger Duke sent jewelry for her. Opening the box, Rachel discovered that Lucian had even taken care of the doll. Therefore, the first thing she decided to do was decorate the doll. When Lucian arrived, she happily ran up to him and thanked him for the jewelry, and then she pulled him along to show him the doll. Lucian looked at the doll that looked like Rachel with great interest. Since he took the previous doll, Rachel suggested that perhaps he wanted this too. Lucian accepted the gift with pleasure. Looking at him, the heroine could not even imagine that he liked dolls so much. Before leaving, the hero gently kissed her forehead and wished her good night. During this time, Noah boasted to Count Orlando that Lucian and Rachel were interested in him. Suddenly, Noah said that he thought Rachel looked like a woman who was called a saint in the past, especially her hair and eye color. This would explain why Cassandra died trying to take over her body. Noah thought Rachel was in love with him and wanted to take advantage of it. He decided to get closer to her, and if she really turned out to be a saint, get rid of her. Amber carefully braided her mistress's hair for the imperial ball. Lucian arrived earlier than the appointed time and watched the girl, waiting for her. Lucian helped the girl with her hair, put jewelry on her, and they went to the imperial ball together. Unexpectedly, the hero asked Rachel not to call him brother, but to call him by his first name. Rachel looked at him with a puzzled look. Their conversation was interrupted by Noah, who noticed them and came up to greet them. Rachel greeted him back with a smile. Noticing the heroine, Elliot also approached her. Having greeted her, he immediately asked if she had thought about his proposal. He deliberately said this loud enough for everyone present to hear. Then Lucian stood up for Rachel and loudly declared that she had already refused him. At this moment, all the attention of the aristocrats was focused on these three. Rachel was worried that Lucian might be accused of insulting the imperial family and pretended to faint to defuse the situation. Rachel pretended to be sick and went to the break room. Concerned, Lucian ran after her. After making sure that no one was around, Rachel urgently asked Lucian not to do this again. However, the hero could not silently watch as someone shamelessly wooed Rachel. But Rachel was worried that he might be accused of insulting the imperial family. However, Lucian was adamant in his position. In the end, Rachel decided to thank him for his help. When Rachel called him brother again, Lucian pulled her close and told her to call him by his first name. Although Rachel was reluctant at first, realizing that it was useless with Lucian, she agreed. Hearing his name from her lips, he smiled tenderly at her. The prince watched them from afar all this time. Noticing him, the hero hugged Rachel tightly to him. Then, he invited the heroine to return to the estate. Since everyone could see that Rachel was not feeling well, no one would think it was strange. Seeing this scene, Elliot thought that Rachel already had a fiancé, so he was rejected. But even so, the prince was not going to give up. After the ball, Lucian listened to moral teachings from the Duke. However, since Elliot was also at fault, the matter was discussed with the imperial family, and both parties decided not to make an issue out of it. While walking through the garden, Rachel met the Duchess, and they decided to take a walk together. As they walked, Rachel and the Duchess discussed recent events, including the ball and the incident in the Duke's study. The Duchess was surprised because Rachel didn't ask any questions. The heroine explained that she approaches questions about the Leon family with caution because she does not consider herself a real member of the family. There was a time when the Duchess herself thought so, but now everything was different. Although they were not real relatives, The Duchess did not consider her a stranger. The Duke all the more sincerely considered her his daughter. These words led the heroine's heart into confusion. After the walk, Rachel returned to her room, where Oscar was waiting for her, who was trying to scare her. They entered the room to get some rest. Sitting on the sofa, Fox ate his favorite candies, and Rachel read a book. Noticing that the heroine was bored, Oscar invited her to tell her a horror story. Oscar began his story with the fact that, underground of the world in which they live, lives a king of demons and evil spirits. 1,000 years ago, this evil spirit rose to the surface to enslave their world. But evil spirits did not have physical bodies in their world. Therefore, they began to inhabit people. Although now the demon king is sealed and the world is calm. However, in fact, it is not completely sealed. So evil spirits, having gained strength, hide among them. Therefore, he advised the hostess to beware of those around her. However, Oscar emphasized that they were only interested in human bodies, and he, a beast man, could be trusted. Rachel was amazed by this story because the original did not have such world settings. The heroine was shocked because she is also a migrant. Oscar learned this story from one grandmother, a turtle who lived for 1,000 years. After the imperial ball, all the aristocrats discussed the newly minted prince, Elliot Saul Leonis. Lucian understood that by opposing the influential Leon family, Elliot would only alienate secular society and worsen his situation. Therefore, the hero believed that the prince was either a fool or he had some guarantees. Lucian was sure that there was some reason why the emperor, having a legitimate heir, was forced to give him the title of prince. He wanted to know this secret in order to take the prince out of the game. A couple of days after the ball, Noah came to visit Rachel. He behaved as gallantly and elegantly as possible to get closer to her. Between the lines, he asked about his engagement to the prince, and the heroine said that she had already refused him. Taking this opportunity, Noah admitted that he has romantic feelings for Rachel. The heroine was dumbfounded. She never expected this. Noah misunderstood Rachel's desire to get closer to him, so she apologized and explained that she was only interested in him because he was her older brother's friend. Realizing that he had been wrong with his assumptions, Noah hastily said goodbye and left. As Kylos left, Cassandra tried to tell him that he had misunderstood, but he did not hear her. Hearing an unfamiliar voice coming from nowhere, the heroine was frightened, not understanding who it belonged to. Everything was fine for a while, but she started hallucinating again. Suddenly, worried beastmen ran up to her. Damien said that they saw the silhouette of the hostess in the window. Suddenly, she was surrounded by muddy energy. Hearing their words, Rachel shared with them that she had just imagined a voice. Having looked carefully at the heroine, Damien said that now there seems to be no cloudy energy, and everything seems to be in order. Oscar showed the owner a beautiful red bead. He gave the bead to Rachel for protection and told her to carry it with her everywhere. Even without understanding the reason for his words, Rachel put the bead in the pendant and put the chain around her neck. Upon learning that my Lord Castia was in the estate, Lucian excitedly ran up to the heroine. Rachel said that Noah had already left, but the hero asked about the purpose of his visit. The heroine said that her excessive friendliness misled him, and he confessed his feelings to her, but she immediately rejected him. Waking up in the morning, Rachel was surprised to find Lucian sitting on a chair next to her bed. Embarrassed, she yelled at him to leave, but Lucian looked tenderly into her eyes and said that she always looked beautiful. Lucian reminded her that they should go to the jewelry store and suggested that they take a short walk. Now, having become a duke, he could do what he wanted and no schedule had any power over him anymore. Having learned that the process of transferring the title was completed, the heroine was also happy because from now on, they will be able to spend time together whenever they want. Arriving at the jewelry store, the hero first decided to look at samples of precious stones. He told the heroine that he was going to buy a ring and asked her to recommend his favorite gems. She had no particular preference and thought about a yellow sapphire to match the hero's eye color. After a long search, they finally found a suitable stone. Rachel also designed the ring. After a long and intense search, the stomach made itself known. Realizing that the heroine was hungry, Lucian suggested that she go out to eat. Tasty and satisfying food improved her mood and filled her with energy. Suddenly, Cassandra reappeared and told Rachel to enjoy her last meal. Seeing how quickly Rachel turned pale, Lucian insisted that she be examined by a doctor tomorrow. However, the doctor did not find any abnormalities and reported that she was healthy. Arriving at Lucian, She forced herself to smile so as not to bother him, and said that, according to the doctor, everything was fine, it was just overwork. After she left, Encho spoke to Lucian again. He said that Rachel is very similar to his lover. He said that all records of him were deleted because he rebelled against the Empire, and the reason was that because of the Imperial bastards, his beloved, who had emerald hair and eyes the color of the night sky, died. Looking at Rachel, Lucian was convinced that they really were alike. Suddenly, Rachel felt a sharp headache again. The next moment, a voice in her head said that it was time. He demanded that the heroine give him her body. Rachel then passed out. Opening her eyes, the heroine discovered that scenes from her past life were flashing before her. The first excerpts were from the day she met her adoptive parents. They were kind to her and affectionately called her daughter. At this moment, Lucian hugged her lifeless body tightly and tried to shout to her. He asked her to open her eyes again and again. The hero took her in his arms and hurried to the doctor. However, Rachel suddenly opened her eyes. Cassandra was delighted with herself because she managed to take over the heroine's body. But her joy was short-lived because the necklace began to absorb her energy. After Cassandra left Rachel's body, she lost consciousness again. Everyone was extremely concerned about the heroine's condition. For 3 days, she did not regain consciousness. However, after a thorough examination, the doctor found nothing and advised him to wait a little longer. Lucian was in despair. The Duchess was concerned because he had not eaten anything during this time. Looking at Rachel, Lucian thought about the fact that he became a duke for her sake. However, if Rachel does not wake up, then for Lucian, the whole world will lose its value. At this time, the heroine continued to observe the happy moments of her past life. Everything was fine until Rachel's adoptive mother became pregnant. Good memories instantly turned bad, and she once again felt abandoned. Rachel ran after them to stop them, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't catch up with them. Suddenly, she heard Lucian's voice calling her. He desperately called her and begged her to open her eyes. His voice helped Rachel come to her senses and let go of the past in order to live for a happy future. Opening her eyes, Rachel saw the emaciated face of her pet, tears dripping from his eyes.